mentor's work had nothing to do with war, so he was determined to live a quiet life, but that lasted only until one day. The man thought about his quiet, peaceful life as he swung his hastily made weapons at a huge orc that was preparing to attack and screaming angrily. A memory came to me of two human silhouettes, a woman and a man, asking for your forgiveness because they could not take him with them on their journey. The couple walked away, leaving only a long shadow behind them. They said their profession would not help them in battle anymore. The man said goodbye to Ryu and asked him to stay and keep caring for the animals. The man held out his hand, asked why they had done this, and begged them to stop and wait because he could fight them too. He wakes up in bed with his arm outstretched. Sunlight pours into the room, its rays already keeping him awake. It turned out those memories were only a dream. Ryu's house sits among mountains and hills. On his farm, Ryu keeps many animals and cares for them well. A man went outside to feed the animals. The cow he had just fed fresh mown grass began to nuzzle him. Delighted, he stroked the animals' chins. Then a girl called out to Ryu. Holding a cat, a girl walks slowly toward the man and sincerely thanks him because Ryu helped her cat finally recover. When the girl came up, the man stroked the animals' heads, glad that her pet has finally recovered. The girl notices that, even though his job is being a mentor, he can still care for animals. The guy smiles cheerfully in agreement, but he is actually at a loss because he did not really want to be a mentor. It turned out the church decides people's professions. Being a mentor makes it much easier to befriend animals. Two of his childhood friends, however, became a young hero and a wizard. To become a true hero, the girl immediately began learning the ways of a knight and training harder. A magician is a support profession, and its owner trained in magic at the church. When we grew up, two of us went on a trip. Rue remembers this and thinks he is making less progress than his friends. A girl holding a cat distracts him again. Upset that he was lost in thought and ignored her, she watches as he snaps out of it and apologizes to her. Yes, he then asks the guest what they had been talking about. The girl reminds you that rumors in the city say his friend is expected to return soon. Yawning softly, the man feels tired and decides it's time for a break, so he stands among the trees and stretches, lifting his arms higher. A breeze ruffled his obedient hair. Ryu didn't expect friends to return like that after such a dream. Ryu realized they had always been together before, but now he was alone, so using his profession he befriended many dogs, cats, and newscripts, played with them a lot, and took care of them. Leaning his hand on his head, he dreams of taming Fenrir so he can follow and stay close to his friends, but that dream is simply impossible to achieve. A sudden angry growl from the bushes behind him pulls him out of his dreams. He wonders what made the sound. Ryu is sure no one should be in the forest. Pushing the bushes aside with his hands, he calls out to see if anyone is there. The man's eyes widen in surprise. Immediately, the smooth fur of an animal catches his eye. A wolf was in the bushes. The wolf's eyes were fixed on the man. Ryu couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful wolf, amazed at how incredible it was, and still unable to believe his eyes when he suddenly noticed its hind leg had fallen into a trap. Sharp iron spikes were digging painfully into the wolf's hind leg, so Ryu moved in and told the wolf to wait while he helped. The wolf didn't appreciate the help and began to growl at the man. As Ryu stretched out his hand, the wolf bit down hard on it. Ryu let someone try to free his hand from the animal's grip and told him to calm down while he held the ferocious creature by the scruff as the wolf floundered and resisted, then managed to remove the trap from its hind leg. A wolf watches the man closely. Ryu asks the wolf to wait while he pulls potions from his bag, and the wolf waits patiently as he rummages. The man pours a potion on the animal's hind leg and says the animal will be all right now and can run freely and confidently. Standing up, he heads out because it's time to get back to work. Ryu barely turns around and the animal is already gone. He grinned and went home. It was a dark night with no lanterns or any artificial light to cut through the darkness, and only the stars and the moon, reflecting the sun's light, lit the scene. Ryu couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, he wondered if that wolf had found his place and returned to his pack, and he considers it a good outcome that he had been beside the animal and able to help him. The man yawns softly and covers his mouth with his hand. Realizing it's late, he decides to go to bed to get enough sleep. Suddenly, a wolf's paw steps into the room. It appears above the reused head. It opens its mouth and greets the man with joy. The animal says tonight is very beautiful. Ryu turns around in fright, stares at the animal, and repeats his last words. The other man realizes the animal is the wolf he saved that afternoon, while Ryu realizes it can talk. Sitting on his bed, the man thinks it might not be a wolf but some kind of monster, since it can understand and speak human language. As the man tried to figure out what was happening, the monster walked around the room saying it had a question, and the man said he would answer if he could. Surprised, the wolf tells Ryu he is very honest. Ryu looks away and agrees. After all, if something happens, Ryu would be quickly defeated by the wolf's sharp teeth. The animal tilts its head to the side. The wolf asks the man to explain why Ryu decided to help the animal anyway, and says Ryu also used his potion. The man is at a loss and considers how to reply. No one would believe he only wanted to help, so he cannot claim that. If he lies, he can make ends meet right away. Suddenly, the wolf spoke up and demanded an immediate answer, since she wasn't patient enough to wait for Ryu to collect all her thoughts in a pile. He mustered his courage and awkwardly admitted he helped the wolf because he thinks she is very beautiful. The wolf was stunned by the remark, since she had not expected that answer, and the man said he would not want such a beautiful wolf to disappear just like that. The wolf started laughing loudly. She then understood why the man had acted that way. He wanted her to live a long life, so he helped her out of the trap. She covers her nose with her paw and says the guy is still very interesting. Saying she was only playing with those things a little, she explains he decided to help her out. The guy exhales, looks away, and understands she didn't need any help at that moment. The wolf turns back to Ryu with genuine interest. She says she likes him and asks his name. He hesitates and she asks him not to be afraid. He gives his name. The wolf repeats the man's unusual name, notes how odd it sounds, declares that from that moment he belongs to her, and ignores his objection. The man didn't quite get the wolf's hint. He assumed he'd misheard her. Suddenly, the wolf said he'd heard everything correctly. From now on, Ryu will be her pet, she said, and the man, taken aback, pointed at himself to clarify she meant him. Without warning, the wolf grew so large that she smashed her head through the ceiling. Splinters of wood scattered across the room. Urging Ryu to come with her, the wolf picked the man up in her mouth. The man thinks the wolf can not only speak but also grow larger, believes it is a Fenrir, and when Ryu asks her about it, she is surprised by what he noticed. He asked them to wait until she had enough so he could at least take a bag with him. After a while, they found themselves in the forest. The Fenrir girl said they were already in place and threw the guy to the ground. Ryu remembers rushing through the forest on all his legs, or rather his paws, and it was a terrifying ordeal because he had to ride inside an animal's mouth the whole way. He looks up to see the treetops completely covering the sky, and sunlight lights his eyes as he takes in this unfamiliar place for the first time. The man found himself in a small pit beside a hill where one of the Fenrir stood. The same figures stood around the hill and watched him with interest. The figure on the hill watched Fenrir and Ryu approach carefully. The man stared at them in surprise. A pack of Fenrir appeared before him. About 20 or 30 Fenrir made up the pack, and the much larger one in the middle seemed like the leader to the man. Terror grips Ryu from head to toe, and he fears he may never make it out of the forest alive. Suddenly, Fenrir, the supposed leader, turns to his daughter and asks what kind of person she brought into their house. Ryu realizes the wolf that carried him in her mouth is the pack leader's daughter. The wolf says she liked him, so she brought him here. The father starts swearing and tells his daughter this is no reason to drag someone into their pack or into the forest. The leader speaks rudely to the protagonist and asks how he knows her daughter. The man says he works on a ranch. The leader repeats his question. Then Ryu began to explain that the leader's daughter had fallen into a trap and he had simply saved her. The Fenrir leader explained the Fenrir could easily destroy any trap, and Ryu said he only later found out his daughter had just been playing with them. The leader is clearly unhappy about having taken a per task again. Turning to her father, the daughter says the person she brought has a mentor's profession, according to her daughter. Perhaps Ryu can help their grandfather. The wolf turns to the man again and asks whether this information is true. The pack leader looks away and says their grandfather lived a long life and that it is unlikely anyone can help him with the problem. Whispering to Ryu, the daughter says her grandfather's health has worsened because his magical power is failing, and she partly blames herself. He doesn't fully understand, but it seems to him that one of their loved ones is not running out at all. They brought him here only because he can help in some way. Seeing that, the man turns back to the leader, and Ryu tells him not to swear so much at his child. Ryu asks permission to see his grandfather. Since it's already running out anyway, the Fenrir have nothing to lose. The leader snaps at the man and with clear contempt orders him to close his mouth. The man turns back to the leader and says he was brought here to help their kinsmen. Ryu said that if the problem is age, he is powerless, but if it is something else, he will most likely be able to help, and at that moment, the leader's daughter looked at the man in surprise. The leader looks down at the man and agrees to his request, letting him enter the elder and saying it will still be a waste of invaluable time and effort. At the tree's forked roots, a couch lies between them, where a very old member of the Fenrir rested. His granddaughter greets her grandfather, calling him her elder. Old Fenrir lifts his heavy eyelids and barely asks why a man is here. The girl is about to explain when the man suddenly interrupts her with the same hand movement. Ryu offers my hand to the elder, and the man says he is very pleased to meet you. Ryu says the elder's granddaughter brought him here. The boy works as a mentor. The man says he's here to help cure Fenrir's disease. The Fenrir elder stares at the man in disbelief and clarifies his profession, unsure the man can help him. Ryu says it can be done, but he will not do it for free just based on that claim. The nearby Fenrir were taken aback and covered their mouths in bewilderment and indignation. Voices from the sidelines immediately snapped at the man, saying a commoner has no right to treat their leader that way, and some even suspected he was trying to trick the Fenrir. At that moment, the elder stepped closer to the boy and asked if the man could really help him. The man agreed and looked him over with a searching gaze, without the boy even turning his nose to the side. Fenrir agreed and told the man he was hopeful for him. Ryu puts a hand on his chest and says this case will end quickly. In return, Roop asks Elder Henry for a favor and says he wants to become stronger, and when Henry asks why, Roop explains that he is like the elder's granddaughter. The man explains she relied on him because she could not cure her grandfather and could not imagine doing it herself, so she turned to him. That's why he no longer wants to let his loved ones down. At this moment, he once again remembers the image of two friends who left him and the hand he had reached out to them. The Fenrir girl looked surprised by the man's words. The elder said he accepts the man's terms and asks who he is and what he should do. The man explains it's simple and begins to take off his glove. The upper part of your arm is closer to Fenrir. He asked me to bite him and drink his blood. The leader called it complete nonsense, saying he did not believe a common man's blood could do anything. Despite the grumbling outside, the elder agreed. The elder brought his mouth to the man's hand and bit him. A huge cloud of dust and a bright glow surrounded the two of them, so the other Fenrir had to hold onto the ground to avoid being blown away. The elder's faces changed, and the boy held on with all his might. The elder let go of the guy's hand. Ryu held her in front of him. He hadn't expected it to hurt so much. The girl is interested in what the guy did. She still doesn't know where the mentor got so much magical power and is curious about it, and the man can tell what she is thinking. She thinks Ryu has more magic power than the hero. There are reasons for that belief. Ryu shows this by wrapping his arm in a bandage. Ryu has too much magical power inside him, and if it's not released, he could explode. The girl warns the guy he is using too much force and says it will be bad if it doesn't come out. Ryu says strength usually comes from training, yet he was born with enormous power that only grew as he got older, making him a true treasure. The girl, distracted by the elder, looks to her grandfather. A surge of strength overwhelms him. The Fenrir elder waved his tail with enthusiasm. No one can recognize him. Others notice he is already feeling better. The granddaughter steps forward and gently touches her grandfather with her crown. Remembering the deal he made with the man, the elder tells him to start training with his pack before he gains the power. Surprised, the man asks whether he can really practice in the Fenrir forest, and an angry growl from behind warns that a person cannot be part of a pack. The elder thanks the man sincerely for his help, but other Fenrir nearby still complain that he is weak, unsafe to trust, and generally ignorant. Someone offered to get rid of the man. The elder, in a menacing tone, told all Fenrir to be quiet. Snarling, he asked if his relatives really wanted to deal with his savior. Suddenly, everyone lowered their heads, pressed their ears to the back of their heads, and began to whine softly. Ryu felt a terrible pressure and couldn't understand why he was so scared, since the pressure wasn't even directed at the guy. Ryu leans toward the girl and asks who her grandfather really is. She tells me he is the very first Fenrir, the ancestor of all Fenrir. The elder asks what the young man wants to do first. He replies he first wants to learn to control magic better. The elder knows this will demand strength. In this forest, the man must change his very nature. He will grow stronger and learn to master his power. Interpreting the leader's words as a call to face his inner self, the man is not sure he can be with his friends again. He steels himself and says he will rely on the elder. The elder and the Fenrir girl close their eyes and nod in approval. Suddenly, he pulls something from his mouth and hands it to the guy. A big fang sticks out of the man's arm. Proudly, the elder declares this is his fang. The man can hardly believe his eyes because the treasure in his hands is the real fang of the Fenrir elder. The elder says the trophy will help the young man control his magic. A Fenrir girl suddenly joins Ryu and says she will look after him during training. Ryu grips the fang in her hands, asks others to wait for his friends because he will catch up with them and wants to grow stronger to make that happen. Ryu quickly dodges an incoming attack. Ryu trains hard with the evil orcs in the Fenrir forest. The evil orc furiously charges at Ryu, drool flying from its wide-open mouth, and Ryu meets the attack with a confident, determined look after about a month of training. Ryu gets a thrill when the goblin jumps on the man and swings his club. Orc attacks are slow and easy to dodge, and Ryu, knowing this, easily avoids the monster's heavy attack. Ryu swings and severs the orc's arm, and the creature screams in a raw, ear-piercing wail. He then strikes its legs, believing that a monster that loses its balance can be safely beheaded. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he feels proud of a job well done and turns to ask about Fenrir's girlfriend. A creature sat on a pile of orcs, yawning sweetly as she waited for Ryu to finish with the monster, noting he has been dealing with an orc for a very long time. The man wonders how Fenrir managed to deal with so many orcs. Fenrir are truly amazing. Fenrir and Ryu stopped briefly among the trees. They lit a small fire to roast juicy, delicious meat. Ryu knows orcs are the weakest monsters, yet he can already deal with them, and Fenrir supports him, saying he seems to have grown stronger. Ryu admits that on the first day the guy only ran away, and says even after a month of training, he can barely handle a monster like that. Ryu built his stamina by repeatedly running from a pack of Fenrir that kept catching up to him. He also learned how to survive in the forest. The Fenrir girl stayed by his side and joined the training. To build immunity, he must eat poisonous berries again, because becoming stronger requires adapting to entirely different conditions. Ryu studies the fang the Elder gave him and realizes he achieved those results because its size lets it be used as a knife. The Fenrir girl proudly tilted her chin up and confirmed the man's words, saying her grandfather is just incredible. Ryu is glad the Elder's granddaughter is looking out for him personally. The Fenrir girl lowers her head and presses her ears flat against the back of her head, upset that she still doesn't have a name of her own. A monster's name is part of its soul, so naming a monster demands a great deal of magical power. When the Elder tried to name his granddaughter, he used up all his mana. The man patted Fenrir's head and told her not to be upset. Ryu said with a bright smile that the Elder will certainly choose a name for his granddaughter, but she just needs to wait. He says he can't bear to look at her sad face. The Fenrir girl gazed at Ryu with hope in her eyes. One of the Fenrir leaps from the bushes and calls to his mistress, the Elder's granddaughter, who asks what happened while the newcomer says he has a message from the head. Fenrir suddenly turned to Ryu and wrinkled his nose in genuine contempt. Urgent news from the Elder about Ryu's training means he must come immediately to hear the leader. Ryu realizes the whole pack is treating him coldly. The Elder stands by the tree waiting for the man. Ryu calls to old Fenrir and greets him. The leader says the man is pretty fast. He says he was clearly told to hurry so he could listen closely to the Elder, and he smiled as he asked them not to pay attention to his colleagues. An Elder says many Fenrir consider Ryu's training useless. The man did not understand and asked what they meant. The Elder says in a serious tone that he has prepared a test for Ryu. Ryu must pass it and prove his strength to join the Fenrir pack. At first the man flinched at the Elder's onslaught, but after a moment he steadied his gaze and confidently asked what he needed to do to join the pack. The Elder speaks with grave seriousness, and Fenrir says Ryu must defeat the demonic rooster as a test and must do it alone. The demonic rooster is a B-rank monster that even a full party of adventurers can only defeat with great difficulty, and facing it alone is reckless. Suddenly, the Elder's granddaughter steps out from behind the man and asks her grandfather if she can help you with the task. The Elder says the whole point of the test is that Ryu must defeat this monster alone, so no one can help him. The Elder sees Ryu has not yet grasped the full power of Fenrir's fang. Ryu looks at his trophy, surprised. Fenrir explains the fangs can destroy anything in their path, even magic, and Ryu has a fang from the Fenrir Elder himself, and will help the man only if the man asks for help. The Elder grins and says that with such an object, the demonic rooster poses no danger to the man. Ryu scratches the back of his head and doesn't quite understand what Fenrir means. The Elder says it's fine that the man doesn't understand yet. His trial begins at sunset, and he should rest until then. As the sun sinks behind the mountain, the bright rays on the treetops fade, and a monster's foot slams onto the ground. Hidden behind a bush, the Elder's granddaughter and Ryu carefully watch the monster. A massive demonic rooster looks mostly like a rooster, but has a large snake instead of a tail and is hunting a harmless animal. Suddenly, it blinds the entire area with light from its eyes. Trying to flee the monster, the animal squeaked one last time as its body, starting with the hind legs, suddenly petrified. Ryu watches a demonic rooster mercilessly trample the animal sculpture until it is nothing but a pile of stones and dust, and realizes the situation is bad. A monster can turn a man to stone with a single look. Its rooster-like tail is poisonous, and the only advantage is that it has a narrow field of view and cannot take off. The elder's granddaughter asks Ryu if he's okay, and he refuses, saying he has no other choice. The man stepped boldly over the bushes and moved toward the enemy. Fenrir's granddaughter wished him luck and urged him to be more careful. The man hid behind a tree to keep the monster from spotting him and armed himself with the Fenrir elder's fang. Ryu knows attacking the demonic rooster head-on would be foolish, so he must deal with the snake on its tail first. He lunged forward and, while the snake wasn't looking, prepared to strike. Ryu struck before the snake could react, taking it down with a single blow. He is very happy to have defeated part of the monster. Ryu didn't hesitate and sprinted to the monster's paws, attacked the paws to immobilize the monster quickly. Without warning, the demonic rooster screamed and swatted Ryu aside with its paw, and the man realized things would not be so simple. The rooster turns its head from side to side and appears to lose sight of Ryu, so the man realizes he is in the monster's blind spot. A man bursts from the bushes and swings to land the attack, while the rooster slips away from its opponent. Only when Ryu looked up at the sky did he understand why this happened. The demonic rooster could fly. It soared high and spread its huge wings. It happened where you least expected it, because he was convinced the demonic rooster could not fly. Now he finds himself in the monster's palm. The rooster keeps spreading its wings. The man will wait until the rooster comes down. Ryu doesn't even have time to finish the thought before the demonic rooster snaps its wings shut, creating a gust of enormous destructive force that throws him back along with pieces of trees. Excited, the elder's granddaughter asks the young man if he is okay. Ryu carefully rises and says he is fine. The wind proved very dangerous, slicing trees into perfectly even pieces, and Ryu suspected the demonic rooster had used magic. Ryu wonders what to do in this tough situation as the rooster won't come down, and he realizes long-range magic would help. Ryu examines the fang, puzzled, and thinks it must contain something that could bring him closer to victory. Then he remembers magic. Ryu recalls the elder's warning that Fenrir fangs can destroy anything in their path, even magic, and the man holds the Fenrir elder's fang. This trophy will definitely help him if he wants it. Carefully and without missing a detail, he recalls the demonic rooster's aerial attack. The monster spreads its wings wide again and launches another attack. Ryu leaps out directly in front of it and dodges the attacks. Ryu knows that doing nothing will only let him get by. He has no other option and believes he must try something. The man takes a stubborn stance and extends a Fenrir fang in front of him. A light appeared around him. The elder's granddaughter notices his mana has increased. Ryu focuses on her magic, and he channels magical power through the fang, so mana gathers at its tip, while the demonic rooster keeps attacking without rest. The mana had reached its limit, so it was time to release it. Ryu swung his fang, releasing a quick shock wave that resembled the monster's attacks. A single blow struck the demonic rooster while it was still in the air, defeating the monster. Pieces of its body crashed to the ground. He could hardly believe his success as he stared at the monster's remains. The elder's granddaughter jumped out of the bush to congratulate him and was sincerely glad he had passed the test. Ryu tried to back up Fenrir's words but collapsed to the ground. Fenrir immediately worried that Ryu might be hurt. The man had no strength left to stay on his feet. Ryu apologizes for the poor welcome at Fenrir's and asks to be allowed to rest. The elder's granddaughter is surprised Ryu chose this place, but did not object and agreed. Unable to speak, he thought he could finally rest and later talk with the elder when suddenly a woman's hand touched his head. Her eyelids were already closing, but a girl's silhouette was faintly visible through them. Ryu wondered who she could be, since he was the only person there. Thoughts no longer had a place in my head, and my eyelids grew heavy. The guy was so sleepy that after a moment he fell asleep. The girl who was sitting next to you let herself rest. Meanwhile, the elder sat nearby watching the painting. He praises the man because he can now safely join their pack. After defeating the demonic rooster, many Fenrir began spending more time with the man. Younger children often asked Ryu to play with them. Adults invited them on hunts and brought all kinds of food. Ryu stretches his arms forward and asks the Fenrir to wait a moment. The elder's granddaughter appears behind him and notices that Ryu has become very popular with the Fenrir. He says the pack members won't leave him alone now. The elder's granddaughter doesn't see this as a bad thing because he passed the test and earned the pack's respect. He realizes this is a very favorable alignment of events. Still, some people don't like the pack's new member. A pack leader stood behind the tree, angrily waiting for you. The pack leader is suddenly subdued by his wife. Her heavy paw presses down on Fenrir's head. She scolds her husband for setting a bad example for his children. Ryu watches the painting, glad that Mother Wolf is nearby, and tells the elder's granddaughter that her mother is quite ruthless. The granddaughter answers that her mother has a higher rank in the pack. Her higher position came from Mom, being the Fenrir elder's daughter. Ryu looks at his torn sleeve, sees his clothes are worn out, and knows he must go to the city to buy new ones. The Fenrir girl asks why Ryu doesn't use the monster skins he extracts as clothing, and Ryu explains he doesn't have the sewing skills to do that. You need money for new clothes, so you'll have to go to the city anyway, and the elder's granddaughter suggested asking her grandfather about it. Ryu agrees and heads to the elder, but the leader, the father of the elder's granddaughter, appears on the way and firmly forbids him from going into the city. The leader believes the man will reveal details about their lair. The leader asks the elder not to even consider letting him go anywhere. Their mother notices. She is upset that her husband has returned to his old ways. Ryu realizes the leader is right because anyone who discovers the pack's location will be in great danger. You asked the elder whether there was any other way into the city. The granddaughter said you should send someone with the man. The elder agreed with his granddaughter and said that route would be safe. A Fenrir grandmother suddenly turns to her husband and asks whether the pack lacks a suitable candidate. The girl is delighted to see her grandmother. The elder's wife turns to him and asks if he really trusts the man so little. The elder agrees with the Fenrir grandmother's view. Turning to Ryu, the elder offers to introduce him to a dwarf. Dwarves are highly skilled and strong, and with the right materials, they can sew things tightly. The elder knows a dwarf in the kingdom. If Ryu tells the dwarf he comes from the Fenrir elder, the dwarf will surely help him. Ryu smiles and thanks the elder. The Fenrir leader protested to the elder, saying Ryu would meet many people on the way to the city, and the elder smiled and told the leader he would send his daughter with Ryu, which clearly surprised everyone. The elder realizes it's time for his granddaughter to see the wider world, trusts you, and has no problem with his partner. The Fenrir girl blushed and turned away from Ryu. The leader forbade his daughter from going out, especially with Ryu. As a friend, he got slapped on the chin by his wife. The mother asks why there is a problem, since Ryu treats her daughter well. Grandma sat on the sidelines and kept her thoughts to herself. Ryu paused for a second and thought about how much the Fenrir liked him. Before leaving, the elder turns to look back, planning to teach the man some magic and earn money by selling the extracted materials. Ryu was very worried at first, but now he is very happy and eager to see what awaits them along the way. Grandma Fenrir asks Ryu whether he remembered everything and took it with him. Ryu says he did, and nearby the mother is still calming her husband, the Fenrir leader. The elder taught him much about the materials and the vault's magic. Now he must travel to the land of the dwarves. Ryu turns and asks where his companion is. Fenrir's grandmother tells him to wait a moment and says he will be very surprised. The elder steps up to the man and thanks him for waiting. A slender, pretty girl with wolf ears stands beside the elder. She looks at Ryu, embarrassed and waiting to see his reaction. Shocked, the man immediately noticed the girl's beauty and wondered where she came from while she covered her mouth, pressed her hands to the back of her head, and asked for his impression. Ryu doesn't immediately understand how the girl knows him or why her voice sounds so familiar. Ryu guesses who it is, and the girl holds her grandmother's paw, overjoyed that she succeeded. Grandma praises her granddaughter because no one recognizes her now. After the battle with the demonic rooster, Ryu remembers seeing a girl and thinks she was the one, while she explains she has been training for a long time. Wanting to travel with Ryu was the whole reason. Previously, she couldn't keep up this appearance on her own, but with advice from her mother and grandmother, she managed. An elder suddenly appears beside the man and asks Ryu to give his granddaughter a name, which shocks the man. Ryu asks the elder whether he wants the man to sign a contract with his granddaughter. The elder agrees and says he believes the man can do it. The guy has to name the girl and sign a familiar contract with her, which gives perks like telepathy, so it's actually a pretty good deal for him. Grandma Fenrir tells Ryu he has no reason to worry. Her granddaughter wants it too. The grandmother says her granddaughter owes the man, so she asks him to give her a name and adds that she and her granddaughter have been together a long time and can safely trust him. My granddaughter doesn't mind either. The Fenrir girl bowed her head calmly and waited for his answer. The man agrees to sign a contract with Fenrir. Grandma asks for a round and thanks him for agreeing. Ryu studies the girl standing directly in front of him, and when the eagle signals to begin, she nods, while Ryu reaches out and places his palm on her forehead. He realizes he must offer a contract, and she accepts. Then you give the familiar its new name as light from his hand reveals every feature of her face. When the magic between them reaches its peak, the man says the name Lear, opens his eyes and declares he is finished, while the woman looks away and repeats her new name. Ryu worried that she might not like the name Lear, even though he thought it suited her. Smiling, she closes her eyes in pleasure, says she likes her name, and thanks the guy. He breathes a sigh of relief, a smile on his face. Grandfather Fenrir approaches from the side. The pack elder asks whether everything went well. The man agrees. Suddenly, Lear grabs Rue's hand and tells him to begin the journey. The girl leads the young man and says goodbye to her grandfather, grandmother, and mother. Her father stood in the distance and comforted himself because his daughter had not said goodbye to him. The two then set off together. Lear saw many beautiful landscapes, was amazed by the mountain views and the barbecue prepared for her, and it must have been very pleasant for her to fall asleep on the man's shoulder while they sat around the campfire. The girl turns to the man and asks about the dwarf country. He says it's a settlement by the mines with many skilled craftsmen where you can find excellent armor and weapons. After explaining the armor and weapons, the man says they will be there soon. A guy friend turns to Lear and asks a question. He asks if the girl feels she's standing too close to the guy. She wrapped her hand around the guy's arm and pressed herself against him. Ryu remembers Lear was not very close to him in the forest. The girl explains she could not do that in front of all her relatives. She says she's long wanted to flirt with a guy like this. Ryo looked at the girl thoughtfully, and after a couple of minutes patted her on the head, wondering who could have spoiled her so much. The man steps onto unfamiliar land. A huge wall stood in front of him and Lear. Lear reached an incredible height. They reached the place. The girl stepped forward and asked you to hurry. The man called out and asked her to wait. He wants her to turn into a wolf. Lear wants to know why this man needed a setup like that. Ryu shows her the card and says the girl does not have it. You must show your card to everyone at the entrance. In human form, the liar will be obvious. In wolf form, she will be treated as a familiar, so the card is not required. The girl quickly transformed into Fenrir, clearly comfortable taking that form again. The guy was glad Lear did not object, and they set off again. A man stood behind someone and asked if it was really a queue to get into the city. The group turns to confirm Rue's words and sees a blonde, freckled man who asks Rue if this is his first time here. Rue agrees, saying he wants to sell monster materials and buy new clothes in this city. A man says the city is perfect for Rue because it has many skilled craftsmen. The guards suddenly called the new acquaintance to move on. The man bowed, said farewell, and gave his name as Mac. He turned out to be a merchant, and they might meet Ryu again. Ryu responds, introduces himself, and says he is very pleased to meet you. Then it is the other man's turn, and a knight in a small window asks why Ryu has come to the city. Ryu holds out his card and says he only wanted to sell materials to buy new clothes, and the knight asks if he is registered with the merchant guild guy. Ryu says he is not registered with the guild because he was planning to sell to the adventurers guild, and the guard understands and, as a precaution, asks to inspect the materials he brought. Ryu agrees and lays his materials out in front of the guard. The guard looks surprised and asks him to wait there for a moment. From a distance, a man was discussing the product with someone else. He comes back and thanks you for waiting. Then a man in aristocratic clothes approaches him and introduces himself as a guild employee. Ryu sits across from a serious man in a stone room with a fireplace, and the man asks for a chance to talk and whether he can buy these skins from Ryu. Ryu is taken aback by the request. The man says the materials are excellent quality and hard to find on the market. The man didn't realize how rare and valuable it was. He still prefers to show them to the master first. Noticing Ryu's confusion, the man asks whether Ryu will refuse to let him buy these materials, and Ryu quickly says he did not mean that at all since he was only headed to a familiar master. A man asks which master the other is going to, if it is not a secret. Ryu replies that the master's name is now Davar Crown. The guard and the man both look ecstatic when they hear the name. An awkward silence filled the room. The man couldn't make sense of what had happened to them. He had already assumed this was Davar Crown, some kind of criminal. Ryu asked the man whether the master was really that famous, and the man defended himself, saying a friend had recommended the master, and Ryu had never seen him personally. The man wears a regretful expression, repeats the other man's words, and explains that Davar Crown is the king of this country. His face abruptly changes from relaxed and serene to shocked. Hearing his master called king clearly surprises him. Now they and Lear are already walking down the road. Suddenly the wolf turns to Ryu and asks him telepathically what they should do next. Ryu was scared because he had completely forgotten that he and Lear could now communicate telepathically. The man replies that he is considering meeting the king, but it will be very problematic. First, he offers Lear the chance to sell the materials. They walk further down the road while the main character thinks about where the guild is, and they meet a friend. It turned out to be Mac, already waving and greeting them. Ryu stepped closer to Mac and asked if the kid was really waiting for them. An acquaintance confirmed it, saying he had begun to worry because the guys had been away so long. Ryu puts a hand behind his head and apologizes to the new acquaintance, saying the material check took longer than expected. Ryu asks Mac where the guild is. Mac agrees, says he is interested in Ryu's materials, and points the direction you need to go. They were actually very close and go into the same place. Mac explains that guilds must constantly report completed tasks, so they decided to build it closer to the entrance. The room was fairly spacious, with a large counter where employees received a task report. Mac leads the man to the counter. Everything here is divided into 3 stages, he explains. Ryu only wants to sell the materials, so he must go to a different stage. Behind the counter, the girl greets Ryu and politely asks to post the materials the man wants to sell with the tincture. He agrees and decides it's best for him to sell materials from weak monsters for now. Excellent quality materials should be saved for the king. He spreads all the skins out on the table, creating a large pile. Suddenly the girl ran off and told the guy to wait, and Mac, standing behind you, asked in surprise where he had gotten so much material. Everyone nearby was surprised by the sight. The material is quite rare, and because it was high quality, some thought the man had just demonstrated the vault's magic. Ryu tried to justify it by saying it was just wild boar skin. Matt said it wasn't that simple. Mac explains the huge boar is an A-rank monster, and also talks about wild boars. It was the first time the main character had heard this, since he had lived in the forest and did not know him. Rushing back to the counter again, the girl apologizes for the man's long wait, says the guild will pay 62 gold coins for the skins, and the man says that sum could be enough for a lifetime. Rue says he will certainly have enough money. She bows and thanks the man for the successful deal. At the reception desk, the girl takes out a bag of money and slides it toward the man. The stacks of coins glittered and looked embarrassingly flashy. Max says he has never seen so much money, and local adventurers praised Ryu for the successful deal, saying only aristocrats or S-rank adventurers would have that kind of wealth, so they thought he was cool. Ryu realizes that the monsters he defeated were all very powerful. Suddenly, Lear starts a telepathic conversation. Confirming his thought that the defeated monsters are very strong, she also takes pride that he trained in their forest, and he calms down, puzzled by her pride. A man takes a bag of money. Now they have the money, so they can go to the king. The travelers hope they do not encounter any problems. A vast stairway of countless steps led to the king. When they reached the castle, a massive arch and a stone wall of columns greeted them. Seated on his throne, the king watches a guard rush up and report a problem, and he wonders what happened. Geth, while the guard immediately drops to one knee and says he has very important news. The guardian reports that a man has just appeared in the city asking to meet the king, and he looks like an ordinary peasant, but has brought skins from A-rank monsters. The guard finds this person very suspicious and asks the king what to do. The king fell silent for a moment, then agreed and ordered the stranger brought to him, saying the man would be useful and the guards should not let him leave. Rue and Lear pause to rest. A woman enters and hands the man's things back, saying she washed everything and sewed up all the holes. The man takes his clothes and thanks the woman sincerely, apologizing for having to use her shirt. Annoyed, she asks what he is doing because his clothes are very shabby, and she remembers that when he arrived she thought he was a tramp. Pretending it was a joke, he laughed awkwardly. He can't say he trains in the forest with Fenrir. Lear asks the man in his head if they will go to the castle today, and the man agrees because the guards promised them yesterday. Yesterday the guards caught the men at the entrance, and now the whole guild knows they are going to the king. One man steeled himself and is determined to go to the king. Ryu stands inside the palace before huge carved doors. A grand arch and a corridor lined with columns lead to them, and guards stand at nearly every column. A guard announces the king is waiting for him, and Ryu crosses the room, wondering where the guards came from and why they are here. Ryuji starts to think the king wants to greet them that way. 2 guards open the large doors before the man and tell him to be more respectful. A door opens before him and bright rays pour out, revealing the king seated on a throne raised several steps to emphasize his status. The king looked at him. Ryu realized this dwarf was very strong and had learned to sense strength from fighting powerful monsters. Judging by the king's power, the dwarf could be compared to monsters of the highest rank. He realizes he should be more modest. Kneeling, he greets the king. Ryu introduces himself as a mentor. The king says his people reported the man arrived in the city to sell goods and buy clothes. The man agrees and points to his product. He wants to go on, but the king interrupts and demands an answer. With a stern look, the king asks whether he stole the leather. Taken off guard by the question, the man refused and said he had gotten the skin while hunting. Ryu wondered what had gone wrong to make the king suspect him of theft. The king paused to think for a while. Looking closer, he says even from here he can see these are excellent materials. He asks you if he got them by hunting in the great forest, saying he is only a mentor. The king tells the man to stop talking nonsense because a knowing Fenrir lives in that forest. The man was briefly confused by the king's words, believed the king did not know Granny, and Ryu understood it was best to stay silent for now. Still, he apologizes and says he came to the king with a request on a friend's recommendation. The king asks who the acquaintance is and clarifies the man's request. Ryu says the friend has no name and is just an ordinary huntress. The king turns away, refusing to believe the man's words. Lear telepathically tells him the eagle is rude. Ryu says the wolf needs to calm down. The man realizes something is wrong. Grandma said they'd known the king a long time, but he did not seem to remember her, and with many armed soldiers nearby, the king is absolutely sure the guy is just lying to his face. Ryu decides it's worth asking the king directly. Stroking his beard, the king agrees. The king offers to discuss all the conditions with him. He also offers to provide equipment for him. As payment, the man had to leave the skins behind him. The king wanted to say more about the skins, but the man rose from his knees and told the king he would not agree to those terms. The king wrinkled his nose and did not trust the man's behavior. He screams, firmly convinced he will not give the king the skin. The king makes a face of contempt and asks what that could mean. Ryu says he cannot trust the king, bids him farewell, refuses any bargain with a man of that status, and is suddenly attacked by a guard. Had you finally become convinced that it was not worth telling the king anything? The old man flinched with tension and after a moment shouted at the top of his voice that the man was insolent. The king ordered the capture of the man and the liar, and the guards immediately surrounded the travelers with spears. Lear says she can do something, but Ryu strictly forbids her because attacking the king will not be tolerated. The king asks Ryu if he will resist. Ryu explains that with this arrangement he cannot defeat the force. The king grins, acknowledges Ryu made a wise choice, and orders him taken to the dungeon. The guard motions the man inside and shoves him forward. Then Ryu and Lear end up in a dungeon. Ryu rubs the back of his head, upset that his skin has been removed, and Lear stares at the man reproachfully and says they should have fought back in that case. He tells her they would have made many enemies and been driven out of the country, and the king might turn against the elder. Now Lear understands how serious the situation is. Luckily, he still had the fang. It was good that the soldiers did not search him. The man is distracted by someone behind him. Ryu was so scared his soul sank into his heels. A man behind him asked why the other had been imprisoned, and Ryu was surprised to find someone else in the cell, because the man had been sitting so quietly he had gone unnoticed. The man says he refused to sell the skin to the king. The dwarf inhales and finds the reason unimportant. Ryu asks why there is a man here. Men looked grave and uttered the single word treason. In short, the man had tried to stop the king from hunting monsters in the great forests, and even if they gathered every head in the kingdom, they could not defeat the Fenrir. Everything makes sense to Ryu now. That explains why the king wanted his skin so badly, but it's still unwise to send them to prison for that. Ryu says out loud that the king turned out to be quite short-tempered. The guy assumes that since the man knows the elder, he must be an extraordinary dwarf, but the man says their king planted the guy, and Ryu cannot hide his surprise. Then the dwarf explains that this is their king's younger brother, and that the king is named Dwarf. Ryu was shocked to hear this. It turned out Dwarf had gathered his trusted soldiers and seized the throne. He looked so much like their king that no one noticed the switch. When the dwarf learned of the plan to attack the great forest, he immediately understood everything. Ryu asks where the real king is now, and the dwarf explains that the king is currently in solitary confinement. Unlike them, the real king sits behind a huge iron door, trapped by a strict curse on the room that keeps him from getting out. Now he understands the elder meant the older brother. I need to get my older brother out and tell him everything. Ryu says he has understood everything and encourages Lear to go with him, thanking her for her help. Surprised, the man asks the main character if he really wants to escape, saying it is impossible, and even a dwarf could not break these bars, while the guy confidently walks toward the bars with Lear and says nothing is impossible for them. Swinging with all his might, he hits the iron bars with Fenrir's fang. They were broken into several pieces, and the dwarf sitting against the wall was shocked by the sight. An unknown man in wolf form stood before him. A man asks who they are. Ryu offers the dwarf a hand and introduces himself as a mentor, with the wolf beside him as his familiar. The dwarf understands and accepts his help. They walk down the corridor, where only fragments of iron bars remain in place, a man peeking around the corner, and only two guards standing by the cursed iron door. The dwarf asks whether Ryu can really help their king. Ryu explains he has business with their true king and will help them. Ryu asks the dwarf cautiously if he can fight. The dwarf proudly says he is a warrior, but must get a weapon first. A man steps out of the corner, smiling, and says they will go ahead and the dwarf will have to cover them. Barely awake, the guard saw two silhouettes flying rapidly toward him. Suddenly, the guards began shouting that they were not allowed here. He ignored the shouts and mentally asked Lear not to remove the guards. Lear must try to knock them out without causing much harm. He understood the men's instructions and began to act. A guard swung his spear, but the main character still jumped out of the way. Seeing the guards move far more slowly than the Fenrir, and with predictable movements, Ryu is confident of victory and attacks one guard from behind. The guard swings his sword at the wolf, claiming he will kill it with one blow, then looks at his sword and finds the blade gone because Lear had somehow seen through the sword and disarmed him. Ryu steps closer to the guard and tells him he's moving too slowly. The man kicks the guard. The guards were taken out, shout to the dwarf that they are done. The dwarf walks over to the guys. The dwarf is genuinely surprised the man was able to take them down because their soldiers are not weak. Ryu says he's been training hard. The guy asks what they'll do with the door. Ryu taps her finger on the door. He knows she's strong, so she carries a curse. The curse was designed to make escape from the inside impossible, but it does not affect people on the outside. Ryu takes up the Fenrir Elder's blade again and swings with all his strength, shattering the cursed door into small pieces. The king sits by the wall. Looking up at the newcomers, he asks who they are. Ryu steps forward and offers his hand. Ryu says it's nice to meet you. A man gives his name and profession, then asks the dwarf if he is Dongvar, king of the dwarves. The dwarf confirms and asks how they got here. Ryu grins and says his brother helped with it. The king bows his head and apologizes for his foolish brother. Ryu kneels beside him and says the king doesn't need to apologize because Ryu has a request for Davar. Ryu asks the king to make equipment for him. The king does not understand and asks why he should, and Ryu explains that Fenrir likely recommended the king and praised his skill. The king suddenly grew angry and said this could not be, since Fenrir had never contacted a human or asked anyone to tell the truth. Ryu asked for permission to prove what he said, then took the elder Fenrir's fang and asked Lear to change into her human form. The girl transforms into a human. The king is amazed by the Fenrir's magic, and Ryu introduces her as the elder's granddaughter. A man hands the king a fang and asks him to inspect it. The king realizes the man told the truth, apologizes for doubting him, and promises to grant his request. The man is deeply grateful that the king agreed to help him, and the king says he cannot refuse a Fenrir friend, so as an apology he asks permission to make something from the fang. The king suddenly glares like a child at the fangs of the Fenrir elders. It will be merely a legendary weapon, he says, and he will forge a true masterpiece. Opportunities like this come only once, and he won't let anyone else touch the trophy. The king kneels and asks permission to forge a weapon for him. The man is puzzled by the scene because he did not expect that reception. Knowing the elder, he must let the king make him a weapon. Smiling, the man says he is relying on the king. The king nods and thanks him for the opportunity. Ryu knows he still has to face the king's brother. Regaining the throne will be harder than it seems. The king reassures his men that the throne still belongs to him and will gather loyal supporters to present evidence of Dorf's treason. The man starts to leave, but Ryu clenches his fists and asks why they won't overthrow the Lion King. It seems a counterattack is being planned. Ryu and Lear approach another prison room, while a group of dwarves stands to one side watching. Ryu grabs the Fenrir Elder's fang, and after a couple of swings, cuts the iron bars of the cage and urges the dwarves he freed to leave. Ryu steps closer to a prisoner and asks if he's all right. The dwarf replies hesitantly that he is. The man turns to the king and asks whether everyone has been freed and if anyone still needs help, and the king thanks him for freeing all his subordinates. Ryu is thrilled by this turn of events and determined to overthrow the Lion King with his new allies. Seeing his excessive determination, the king suddenly tells him he does not need to challenge the Lion King at all. The king admits he fell into this situation by letting his guard down, and the dwarf insists Ryu let him handle it alone. Clenching his fist over his chest, the king feels it's his duty as an older brother to reason with his younger relative. Ryu saw the king's worry and even a touch of guilt, agreed with Mr. Davar, and asked him to be careful. The king told the man that if he and Lear went left, they would find a hidden passage to the outside. Mr. Davar will contact Ryu after he finishes his business. Finishing the conversation with the man, the king moved to raise his subordinates' morale. Mr. Davar raised his hand and urged his associates to restore the throne to the rightful ruler. You just stared after the crowd leaving angrily. The man suggested Lear go back to the hotel. She agreed. They follow the path Mr. Davar told them about. One of them says they need to turn left. Lear notices something strange. The girl's ears swivel as she tries to locate the sound. Lear asks Ryu if he heard anything. Ryu refuses. Lear's ears pricked again at the faint sound that had reached her moments earlier. The voice sounded familiar. Ryu grew worried and asked the girl if it could be a monster, and Deer, unsure, pointed to the exact direction the sound came from. Ryu stepped to the corner, waited a moment, then jumped out from behind it, holding the Fenrir elder's fang in his hands. A baby bird lay on the ground, too weak to stand and clearly on his last legs. The girl wonders how the chick ended up here, and Ryu suggests it may have gotten lost because it looks weak. Ryu reaches out her hand to check the chick. The chick notices the movement from the corner of its eye and starts squeaking loudly, and as it squeaks, large flames shoot from its beak and nearly hit Rue and Lacer. The man was genuinely surprised the chicken could breathe fire, but Lear said it was no surprise because it was not an animal but a monster. Flames begin pouring from the chicken's beak as it squeaks erratically, and Ryu holds his palms out toward it, saying he is not its enemy. The chicken squeaked one last time and fell, and you might have wondered what the problem was. There is no visible external damage. The man picked up the chicken and held it in his arms. Lear assumed he was hungry because she got weak when hungry. Ryu searched his pockets for something to eat, then remembered that all their belongings had been confiscated. Ryu suggests Lear take the chicken and keep moving to escape the dungeon. The man promises to get the creature something to eat as soon as they leave. The group escaped the dungeon and now sits at a table outside the hotel, and Lear and Ryu fetched food for the chicken, who eagerly ate the meal kindly offered to him. Ryu grins and notices that even though the chicken is small, it's for 3. Lear notices he looks healthy now. Ryu agrees with the girl and picks up the chicken, while the man extends his palms, holding the bird forward so it can take off and fly home. Rather than fly away, the chicken turns to Ryu and after another squeak, starts to stroke his palm. Lear notices the chicken has become attached to the man. Ryu agrees with the girl's observation. Lear asks you whether he should sign a contract with the monster. The man tells the woman he did not save the creature for that reason. Ryu doesn't mind if the chicken wants to stay near him. He turns to the chicken and asks if it wants to sign a contract with him. Lear reacted to the remark with clear displeasure, gave him a reproachful look, then turned away and reminded him she was following him too, leaving him to wonder what she was thinking. Without thinking twice, the man suggests relaxing at the hotel today and visiting King Davar's palace tomorrow. Sunlight filled the room with fierce, lion-like strength and kept the guy from sleeping another minute. Ryu wrinkles his nose, unsure why everything feels so hard for him. He felt a heavy pressure on his stomach. Ryu sits up and rubs his eyes, thinking Leo may have climbed onto the bed. Instead of Lyris, a huge bird lay on the bed, keeping Ryu from sleeping peacefully. The man stares at the bird, clearly bewildered. After he realized it, he still refused to believe his eyes. Ryu's scream woke Lear. A girl rubbing her eyes asked why he was screaming. Ryu pointed at the bird in a panic and told Lear to look. Lear immediately recognizes the bird as the chicken they rescued in the dungeon yesterday and tamed, and Ryu confirms this with a girl and asks why it has grown so large. Lear says the monster must have grown much stronger. Monsters can evolve by absorbing magical energy. Ryu never imagined that. Lear thought it over again because such events are very rare. The girl thinks this baby might be someone. Lear does not have time to finish when a loud knock sounds at the door. It turned out soldiers had come for Ryu, and the bird was greatly frightened by the unexpected sound. In an instant, the bird jumped up and spread its wings. A few seconds later, it fluttered up and hurriedly flew out the window. The maid comes in and urges Ryu to answer because he is already awake. Ryu and Lear only had time to glance at the trail left by the birds as they flew. Ryu is summoned before the king, who is already waiting. He and Lear step up to the throne and greet his majesty. The king says he is glad to see Ryu. Ryu asks King Davar if he has dealt with his younger brother. The king agrees and says it all happened because of Ryu. The king asked Ryu to speak with someone before Ryu began equipping and making weapons for the man. The king abruptly snapped at the figure standing on the steps to the throne and ordered him to speak to Ryu. The silhouette proved to be the king's younger brother, Dorf, who stood with his hands folded and addressed Mr. Ryu and Mrs. Lear. The king's younger brother suddenly drops to his knees and bows his head before the man, offering his sincere apologies. You agree and notice that Dorf seems like a different person. Then Lear peeks from behind the man and asks Dorf why he decided to pretend to be the king. Ashamed, Dorf admitted he had always envied his older brother. After all, Dorf's brother is a world-famous master. Everyone in the neighborhood talks about him, and the youngest isn't even trusted with the materials. The younger brother admits to everyone here that he was deeply offended by the arrangement. The dwarf admits he will one day lure his younger brother into a trap and put him in a car, because the brother has taken the king's place and now has access to the country's resources, so the dwarf can get everything he wants. Dwarf says Ryu and Lear then arrived, and the king's younger brother immediately saw from the materials the man had that Ryu had brought a top-tier, A-ranked item not found anywhere else in the country. Dwarf admits that as soon as he heard the man was a mentor, he realized it would be easier to take materials out of reuse. The Lion King remembers the man refused to sell the materials, and the dwarf realized Ryu had seen through him and, unable to control himself, made a terrible mistake. The younger brother lowers his head to the man one last time and asks for forgiveness, and you understand everything and forgive Dwarf. King Davar himself steps forward and echoes his younger brother's apology, sincerely asking you to forgive him and to hear one request. King Davar, serious, asked Ryu to let Dwarf make equipment for the man. The younger brother was stunned by the king's proposal. After a moment, Dwarf protested to his brother, but Ryu interrupted them. He asks why the king made the request. King Davar says he can still make the strongest weapons, but his brother is far better at making equipment. Clenching his fist, the king says this will be their redemption. Memories of the king linger as the first brother wipes sweat from his forehead, tired from the hard work, while another brother examines a precious dagger that seems to sparkle in his eyes. They used to do everything together, but he pulled away and took all the orders for himself, denying his brother the chance to grow without realizing how much it would hurt him. He waved goodbye as Dwarf watched, upset. Right now, the king and his brother stand with Lear and Ryu in the middle of the corridor, and the king believes that if he had not done that, they could have avoided this conflict. As the older brother, he failed. Dwarf tries to reason with his older brother and tell him this is not true. Ignoring him, the king says he vouches for Mr. Ryu's skills and asks if he can fulfill one of his requests. Lear called his name, and he, realizing what she meant, said he relied on the king's younger brother. The king thanks you, but his brother still does not understand why he agreed. The gentleman explains he could not refuse the services of two of the country's best craftsmen, and if they produce top-quality equipment and weapons, there will be no problems. The king asks if Dwarf has understood everything. The younger brother still cannot believe it. Having done so much wrong, he asks his older brother if everything is really okay. His older brother says that if he truly regrets what he did, he should build the world's best equipment for you. Claiming to be a great master, he insists on proving it with deeds rather than sinking into disgrace. He asks Dwarf not to let him down, since failure would damage his reputation, and to do their job as well as they did in the old days when they handled everything together. The king offers his hand, and the younger brother shakes it as tears of joy run down his face. The dwarf deftly raises his brother's hand and says he will of course create the best equipment in this country. Rue has been watching them and listening to their conversation for a while and says he is glad the brothers have finally reconciled. The king apologizes for making him wait, and once the problems are sorted, it's time to move on. Later, in a small village, Tia says they haven't returned here in a long time and expects a crowd of residents to gather, while the man beside her calls her a hero and says it's no wonder everyone loves her. Wanting to meet Ryu as soon as possible, he asks the girl to hurry because he and Ryu have been friends for a long time and haven't seen each other for so long. Agreeing with Taiga, she hopes the guy is fine because they want to talk to him about many things. As they approach the house, they see it has been destroyed. Anyone could go inside and inspect the entire interior of the house. Stunned, both heroes are unsure what to do, since everything was fine when they left home. A guard stepped forward, called them heroes, and asked why they were there. The girl tried to tell him about Ryu but couldn't find the words. Her only concern is what happened to Ryu and where he is. The man tells Tia to calm down and not to panic yet. He tells the guard their friend's house is here and asks him to explain what happened, since everything was fine before he left. The man says their friend is missing. They stand stunned, staring at him and not sure what to say. The news was unexpected. Tia can't understand how he could have disappeared, and Taiga asks how long he's been gone. He tells them it has been about 2 months. One night the man heard a loud noise, ran over, and found the house already destroyed with no time to do anything. The man asks the guard if he has any idea why you were left, but the guard has no clue since he can't read minds, and because the man worked hard every day and helped everyone with the cattle, no one expected him to be missing. The guard, looking sorry, says that when they searched they found only scraps of wool in the house, and he doesn't think it's from an ordinary animal, and he says a monster probably took him, and the girl's face changes instantly. Tia spins and heads to her horse, saying she's going to look for the main character. Taiga tries to stop her because they still have a mission. She reassures him she will search for you and keep the mission in mind, so he has nothing to worry about. Taiga says she doesn't know where to look, but that does not stop her, and she will search everywhere for him. And tells you to wait because she will definitely find him and not let him die. Meanwhile, at Ryu's location, he suddenly sneezes after mentioning Tia, and Lear standing beside him wonders if he is ill. The rescue operation has begun. The king's younger brother is busy forging weapons at his anvil, while the onlookers watch from the sidelines. When everyone in the room sees he failed to melt the material, they sigh in despair. Ryu concludes that the material does not melt and suggests he try again. Dorf looks sad and disappointed and says he has already tried dozens of times to melt it, but it never worked, so you realize it is not easy to melt down and the fang is too strong. Dwarf realizes that since this is Fenrir's fang, a flame with power comparable to an elder's can melt it. Ryu cannot tell whether a flame like Fenrir's truly exists. The cat-eared girl remembers something. He asks what they think about the Garda flame. The hero, standing in disbelief, repeats the question she just asked. One brother joins the conversation, not understanding what kind of hail it is or whether she means the legendary bird, while another says he heard Nazna can kill dragons, and the elder doubts these are anything more than children's fairy tales. They really saw her, and since they had offered to use the guard, the girl turned to the guy and asked if he still understood what she meant. He explains they found a baby bird in the dungeon and asks where it came from. Then he is surprised it was a guard, and the girl says his magic helped it grow noticeably, and ordinary monsters cannot grow like that overnight. Only high-ranking monsters can do that, so she's sure it was hailed. The older brother asks the others where he is. Ryu tries to explain his current location. Dorf concludes he must have flown away. The king thinks he is probably on the mountain behind the castle, and Dorf asks his brother if he is sure because it has been a long time since he left. He tells him they have no other choice, and only the guard can create a powerful flame to melt the fangs. Unable to leave the castle unattended and feeling guilty, the brothers ask Mr. Ryu to search for him. He assures them they can count on him and not worry, sometime later. The girl and the guy are in the desert. The main character promised the brothers he would find Garrett, but Garrett was hard to find. He felt he'd sounded too presumptuous, and she replied that he might be right. When Guard sensed the main character's mana, he should have flown to him immediately because he recognized him, and you never expected him to be used as bait. The main character tells her to look elsewhere because there are still many places they haven't checked. A sound makes the girl's ears react, and she tells him to stop because Lear heard voices from the other side. Turning around, they see the little bird trying to get away so it doesn't fall into the monster's mouth while the monster chases him. The heroes recognize him as Gerard, and the girl notices he is oddly fluttering his wings and can barely run. Ryu says he is probably injured and asks Lear to hurry. The girl says she understood everything and they are rushing to his aid. The monster approached the little chick and was about to attack him, but Lear stopped it just in time. She asks the main character if Garrett is okay. Ryu examines the bird and says he sees no external injuries, but that does not mean the bird is completely healthy. They head back to the castle to discuss the flame they'll need later to melt the fang. After a while, they are all in the castle, and Garrett lies unconscious on a pillow while regaining strength. Ryu had not expected the bird to be so close, which surprised him, because he thought the guard would fly much farther, and Lear suggests the bird may have no parents. The main character asks Lear whether she really believes that explains why he was alone in the dungeon, rather than any other reason. Lear says he has nowhere to return to, so he could not have flown far from them. It all becomes clear to Ryu. The king enters the room and asks the main character about the guard's condition. He says he's fine, just a little tired, so Garrett needs some time to rest. You can't be 100% sure you'll help them. The bird begins to wake slowly. He notices the bird. He checks the guard's condition and says he can rest a bit longer. The bird did not expect to see so many people after its awakening. Immediately she flies to Ryu, clings to his shoulder, and speaks in her bird language about something. The main character asks whether he is still afraid of people and asks him not to be. She calms him, saying it's safe here and he has nothing to worry about so he can relax. The girl watches them for a while. Then he asks whether the main character wants to sign a contract with Gerard. Ryu did not expect to hear that and does not understand why he would do that. Lear says that if they are not there, the bird could get into trouble. In any case, he needs someone he can rely on, so the best option here is a contract. Ryu says the contract is a good idea, but wants to let Goddard decide for himself. Ryu asks Garda to sign a contract with him because he could really use Garda's strength. If he doesn't want it, he can fly away safely, but he still wants to hear his answer, so he asked what he would choose. Everyone here is watching the man and the bird. The bird watches the main character closely. Garrett flaps its wings and lifts off the ground. A man watches its movements closely, stunned. A bird perches on his shoulder, as if accepting his proposal, and chirps to him in its bird language. Rue can hardly believe it and asks if he is sure of his decision, and the bird squeaks to confirm it once more. Lear praises the man for getting a contract with the legendary bird, since that is very difficult, and he thanks her and asks what she should call him. Dorf, standing nearby, hesitates about contacting Garrett. The king says this is a rare opportunity and suggests they continue in the city square for the views. Some time later, the four of them and guard arrived at the square, and Ryu didn't understand why so many people were there. Both the guards and the state's residents are here. Someone is shouting the king's name, and the hero then asks whether it is all right that so many people have gathered. Because of his status, the king apologized to him since attention was unavoidable, and he did not want to draw more notice. He asks if they should come another day, but Ryu says everything is fine and that they should finish as soon as possible because waiting will add a few days. With the bird in his hand, the main character says he will now name it and sign a contract with it. The man tells the legendary bird he will perform a ritual to make them a family and hopes God agrees, and God beeps in agreement. The main character then performs the ritual while the bird leans closer to the gun. Smiling at the bird, Ryu said his name was Karin now. The bird closed her eyes at his words. A hurricane made of flames appears in their place and sweeps away everything in its path. The king doesn't understand what's happening, and Rue is at a loss because this has never happened before, but Lear spots something in the hurricane and calls to the man, asking him to look where she is pointing. An egg appeared inside the hurricane and hovered in the air with nothing beside it. They move closer, unsure whether Karin is here, and Lear says Garrett is probably evolving, while Rue believes this can only happen to high-ranking monsters. He can't tell whether Karin is one. Lear explains to the main character that evolution is gaining a new form and power, and thanks to Ryu's power, she will be able to evolve. Curious about the guard's appearance, the girl wants them to greet her properly. When the egg began to crack, the main character said Karin was hatching and put out his hands to keep anyone from falling. You catch a winged girl as she falls and gently set her on the ground. He asks if Karina is okay since she hatched so suddenly, but Garrett only calls him Dad. The main character was surprised to be called that, and Karin adds that even after so much time since they last met, he hasn't changed and is still very cool. He had said they'd be close as a family, but he didn't expect her to take it so seriously, and he didn't understand why Karin calls him Dad. Those questions haunted him. Ryu still wonders why she took human form and why she calls him Daddy. Karin says she has always been alone. Born with no parents or friends, she kept searching for them, but whenever people noticed her they attacked, and she spent her whole life running away. Lear now understands why she ran away when she heard soldiers approaching. Karin says she saw everything correctly, but that day her dad and sister were helping you and Lear. It was the first time anyone had treated her so kindly. She really liked both of them and decided to take a form like theirs, a human form. The characters look at each other, and Ryu approaches Karina and pats her on the head, saying he understood everything. The king's voice comes from the hurricane, asking if Mr. Ryu is okay and asking him to respond. The hero says they're fine, asks Karin to remove the flame, and she does so without delay. Ryu waves to announce their arrival, and Dorf sees the men walking in single file. The main character walks up to the brothers and says everything went fine, but Dorf doesn't grasp how big it was because they caused a real firestorm here. Once the younger brother calms down, the king asks who the girl beside him is and introduces her to the brothers, saying this is Karin, and she has chosen to take human form. Dorf is stunned by what he heard. A guard stands before him, while the king is not at all surprised because this is exactly what one would expect from the legendary bird. Ryu asks whether they can handle it with Karin's help and says that with such a force they won't have any problems. Ryu said it was time to return to the workshop, get to work, and calm the townspeople. As they headed back, Karin's feather fell out and lay on the ground. One young man picked him up and examined him quietly, saying he wanted to find out who this Ryu was because he clearly seemed unusual. 1 month later, Dorf asks the main character to try on his creation, and Lear stands beside him, also waiting for him to try it on. The dwarf calls this his masterpiece, a suit of leather armor he made himself. Rue is thrilled, saying the armor is incredible, and he can hardly believe he created it, and Dorf says it's all thanks to rare materials. He also applied an effect that prevents temperature from changing, and the main character doesn't understand, so asks him to explain further. He tells him simply that fire and ice magic won't work against armor. For resistance to fire magic, they should thank Karin. he achieved it by adding her feathers to the material. He is certain protection from cold and heat will be very useful. Ryu's eyes sparkle. Dwarf thanks him with delight. Only the sword remains. The king then enters the room and asks for forgiveness for keeping them waiting. He tells him his blade is ready. In turn, the main character says the work was worth the wait. Dwarf is surprised to learn the blade is made from Fenrir's fang. However, Ryu asks whether it was meant to be a dagger and why only one side is sharpened. The king tells him this blade is special and that he used techniques from the East because one-sided sharpening is said to make it sharper. Karin, who entered with the king at the same time, says she also helped him make the weapon, and Ryu pats her on the head while praising her. He says the only thing left is to give the blade a name. The main character is puzzled about why it needs one. The king explains it is important to have the blade engraved so everyone knows it belongs to him and only he can use it. 127 He hadn't expected the request, so his mind offered no options, but then a brilliant idea came to him. He proposes naming the blade Wolf. The king says it will now bear that name. Lear says that was predictable, and Ryu says he does not see the problem. The eldest brother says it's pointless to destroy it, and that it's better to test it in a real battle, and the main character agrees. Later, a huge crowd gathered again in the city square around Ryu and his comrades, and someone called out that a show was apparently planned and they were looking forward to it. The main character is surprised by how huge the crowd is. The king says regretfully that the crowd has apparently heard about him again. The king assured him not to worry, saying they would keep the citizens away from him. Ryu says he understands everything but will not get carried away so he does not accidentally harm civilians. The king tells him to proceed. All eyes were on the speaker, as he announced that the blade made by the king himself would be tested immediately. At last the king asks him to release all the blade's magic, so the king can see how strong it is, and Ryu says he understands, and now stands alone in the square. All eyes are on him. Although told not to hold back, the main character fears his power could hurt the citizens, so he chooses to aim his punch at the sky. He swung his sword, and everyone is closely watching the trajectory of the strike and where it is headed. The impact scatters the clouds, leaving everyone stunned, including Ryu. The crowd cheered, calling it amazing, saying they had not expected to see anything like it, and admiring the main character's incredible strength. Ryu can hardly believe it either. Karin says her dad is the strongest, and Lear steps closer and says she expected nothing less. The king approaches the hero and says this is to be expected from Fenrir's fang, because the concentration of magical power is at a completely different level. The king began talking about everything going his way, but a voice telling everyone to look up distracted them. Everyone looked up and saw a dragon flying in the sky, getting closer by the second, with someone standing on its back. Ryu freezes in shock as a dragon breaks through the clouds, flying straight toward them with several people visible on its back. As the dragon nears the ground, the people on its back jump down to the ground. A group of 4 confronts the main character and his companions, all wearing the same uniform. Standing in front, the man starts the conversation and says he and Ryu have not seen each other for a long time. The man looks confused and cannot tell how he knows this person, but Lear brightens when she sees him and calls him Grandpa. Ryu stands stunned for a few seconds, then realizes he is an elder. The man smiles and tells him the main character is seeing him in human form for the first time, not in dragon form. Then the main character realizes the people standing behind are Dad, Mom, and Grandma Lear, and yet he thinks her grandmother looks too young. As if reading his thoughts, the woman asks whether he has wondered why she looks so young, and the man denies it, saying he never thought about it. The king approaches Mr. Fenrir and asks how he is doing. Mr. Fenrir replies that he has no complaints about his health and that everything is pretty good. The king still wonders why they came here. The elder says he only wanted to talk to Ryu. He wants to know something but won't talk about it in front of everyone, so he'll bring it up later when they're alone. Curious about what Mr. Fenrir wanted, the main character begins to explain that a dangerous creature has recently awakened. The Dragon of Evil gave him that name. A massive 3-headed creature that can use every kind of magic. A great warrior had fought it before but could not defeat it, so the elder had no choice but to seal it. Ryu pictured him in his head, called him a real demon, and said he did not want to deal with him, while Mr. Fenrir said he had recently felt the seal start to weaken, so I decided to prepare for the battle. He will need allies in the battle, so he went to Ryu for help, but he can't even imagine the danger and won't be able to fight it. Ryu steps closer to the elder and asks if you really think he can handle the dragon, but the elder laughs and says he also studied in the Great Forest and is now a cut above any human. The elder asks the main character to be a little more confident in himself. Ryu says that because the elder told him this, he will do it. Lear, someone peeking out from behind the main character, says he will also help his grandfather. Ryu turns to the elder and asks where the dragon is now. The elder says the dragon is in the Dragon Empire. The seal is in a cave near the Imperial Castle, so this time they will all fight together. He will tell you the details on the way to the kingdom. Ryu cannot understand how this could be possible. A strange sound comes from behind him. When he turns, he sees a huge dragon. This leaves him seriously frightened. The dragon told him it was a rather amusing sight, since it had not expected Fenrir to ask a human for help. Tilting his head toward him, he asked the main character if he was a disciple of an elder. Ryu can hardly believe he is talking to the dragon, who brought the entire Lear family. Mr. Fenrir decided to introduce him to the others. This is his son-in-law, the Earth Dragon. The elder's son-in-law is pleased to meet the main character, and the man says he is glad to meet them, but Ryu is shocked that the legendary monsters are in the same family and can understand human speech. The crowd in the square doesn't understand what's happening and can't believe the main character can talk to a dragon. Fenrir says his son-in-law will take them to the Dragon Empire. Ryu says it is more than he can handle, and he is not yet confident in his abilities, and the brothers say they will go and will not miss this opportunity. Later, everyone flies to the Dragon Empire, and the elder sits with the group to ask the main character about his new girlfriend. Laughing, he says he is not only Lear but also Karin, praises the man, and asks him to look more closely so he has the strength to care for both of them. The father who is always around. In their conversation with Grandpa, Lear tells the man he is not a good person. First, Ryu stole his daughter from him, and now he is cheating on her and warns that he will soon come to an end. The girl's mother hits her husband on the head and tells him to stop talking nonsense. She turns to the main character and asks him to ignore it, then admits her husband missed him a lot, and Ryu notices they haven't seen each other in a month. He tells the girl's parents she cares deeply about Karin. They always eat together and even bathe together, and Lear explains this is because she considers her her younger sister. Grandpa Lear asks Karin about her parents and whether she thinks they will worry about her. Holding her older sister's hand, the same girl says she has no parents but she does have Ryu and Lyre, and the elder says everything is fine. Despite being very young, she's lucky to meet such kind people along the way. He explains to Karin that if his granddaughter considers her a younger sister, she is like a daughter to them. It may feel odd at first, but he asks her to call them her family. The rest of the family also smiles at her warmly. Joy fills Karin's eyes, a smile spreads across her face, and she tells him she understood everything and thanks him. Later, they ride an earth dragon, and he tells them they will arrive soon. Ryu looks around, delighted by the view of Earth and how beautiful it is. From his vantage point, the whole city looks huge, and he can hardly believe his eyes. Crouching slightly to take in the area, he asks if this is the Dragon Empire, and the elder confirms that the whole city and palace belong to it. The dragon joins the conversation and admits he doesn't like the empire because it's so small, and the main character can't understand how it could be called a small country. The dragon said his kind and the Dragonites were good friends, but since the Dragonites are as tall as humans, they had to build a palace to human standards, and the dragon can transform to live there in peace, although Ryu said that would be difficult. Soon after they reach the gate, the Earth Dragon asks them to move on. Ryu thanks him. A long-haired man appears in front of him, leaning over him. The dragon says he will show them around. The main character had not expected the Earth Dragon to take human form so abruptly. They reach the gate guarded by sentries, greet the master and bow to him, and he thanks the guards for their hard work. They ask whether the people with him are his friends, and the gentleman says they are Fenrir and his family. One guard can hardly believe it and says that with those legendary monsters on their side, victory is certain. Pointing at Ryu, the second guard wonders who he is, and the first guard explains that Ryu is his student. The guards cannot understand how their master's disciple can be human, and they worry if he will be all right because people are very weak, and Ryu is unhappy with their words but cannot object because, compared to them, it is true. Angered, Father Lear confronts the guards, accusing them of calling the student who studied under their elder a weakling, and a guard recoils from his menacing presence and says they did not mean that. Ryu wonders why her father is so angry and defends him, saying he probably thought they were seen as weak. Filled with anger and determination, Father Lear says he understands everything and that they will show how strong their student is. As they entered the gate, Father Lear told them to call his boss and warned that Ryu would kill him in 2 seconds. He had no idea how he had ended up in that situation or why people were making decisions for him. The boss looks intimidating, with small horns on his forehead, and now they stand away from everyone to begin their duel. Father Lear shouts from the crowd that the man must not even think of losing, while Karin only wishes the main character good luck, and all this puts heavy pressure on Ryu, who dislikes it because he never wanted to be involved in any fights. The Earth Dragon calls them over and asks them to review the rules of the duel. He asks if they'll agree that when one side can't continue fighting, that side automatically loses, and the boss has no objections, as does the main character standing before him. The boss tells him that, although Ryu is an ordinary man, he himself will not hold back and orders him to prepare. The Earth Dragon lowers his hand and says the duel can begin. As soon as the signal to start the flight sounded, the boss attacked without hesitation. Moving so fast, he closed in with his sword aimed at the opponent's face, but the main character stopped him in time and, though it was difficult, repelled the attack. The boss retreated and waited for a better moment to strike. That moment came immediately. In an instant, he was back up close to the main character, sword in hand. Seeing how hard it is for the boy, he asks what would happen if the boy really intends to face the Black Dragon with such forces. Ryu can't handle this flood of attacks. It's beyond his strength. His opponent is both powerful and fast, leaving no way to counter, but Ryu can't give up because his reputation is at stake. He knows he must use the sword technique. Attacking with magical power will give him a chance, but he must hold back his strength to defeat him at the right moment. When their swords touch again, he knows it's time to use the sword technique and presses his blade's tip against his opponent's sword. Unprepared for the magical force, he slams into the wall and leaves a large dent. Everyone there is shocked, including Ryu. The main character holds the blade carefully, still not used to the wolf's power. The Earth Dragon raises his hand to signal the duel is over and declares Ryu the winner. The guards, who are watching, run to their commander lying on the floor. Father Lear walks up to the man and praises him, saying he is doing well. Karin doesn't hang back and rejoices in her father's victory. Ryu is more worried about his opponent and turns to the Earth Dragon to ask if he is all right. The man told him nothing terrible had happened because they had agreed to a duel, and Ryu breathed a sigh of relief. An elder approaches the man, places a hand on his shoulder, and says the main character has grown stronger. The Earth Dragon promises to open the Dragon Empire's gates for them, then places both hands on the doors and pushes them open. Everyone froze, waiting. He opens the gates with a heavy, deliberate motion. Still, he manages it, and a striking view unfolds before them, revealing the Empire's scenic landscape. The Earth Dragon leads them. As they pass a house, a man stands at a window, his face hidden in shadow. He says he never thought the Dragon Army's soldiers could be defeated so easily because it had seemed impossible. He is eager to meet the people who have just arrived because they have such interesting personalities. The travelers walk along the main street, where many people have gathered. Ryu carefully adjusts every street and says it is very beautiful here. The Earth Dragon tells him this is the land of dragons, so human lands are very different. Karin stops and studies the store counter. Ryu and Lear notice this and approach her. The girl asks what happened. Karin hadn't expected anyone to follow her and say everything was fine. Lear looks at the store counter and sees bows on display. Concluding she wanted to buy one, she asks if she liked the bows. After hearing their conversation, the Earth Dragon says there is still a little time before the battle, so they can walk around the city on their own. The main character then invites them to go shopping and buy anything they want. The girls agree immediately and are delighted by the offer. Later, the dragon says they must meet the Emperor first. Everyone they pass is working hard and focused on their own business. There are many different races here, not just dragons, and the Earth Dragon walking in front confirms this and says the dragons treat all races well. Dragonites are half dragon and half human. After evolving, some dragonites developed a lizard-like head. The main character listens closely and asks what kind of dragon emperor he is, and the dragon replies that the emperor is the strongest dragon in the empire and far stronger than him, which the man finds hard to believe. The Earth Dragon interrupts his thoughts and says he will understand everything as soon as he sees him, then asks him to enter the hall since they have already arrived and their conversation is over, and the door opens. Before him, the Emperor and Empress sit on the throne. Both seem friendly, and Ryu notices their aura is very different from the rest, making it immediately clear they are the Imperial family. The Earth Dragon bows and greets the Emperor. Both rise from their thrones and move toward the travelers who just entered. The Emperor greets the Earth Dragon, and the Empress says she did not expect him to find so many allies. When she sees a man capable of defeating the captain of the guards, she says these words and looks at him appreciatively. Her expression shifts to a slight smile as she says she has never seen such strong people. He says he is counting on the main character. The Earth Dragon turns to the man and asks him to respond. The Emperor interrupts their conversation and says he wants to discuss tactics with the Fenrir family first. The Empress says they have prepared rooms for them, and the group looks at the Dragon Country rulers in surprise. The Elder asks, except for them, what about the others? When the Emperor hears the question, his expression changes. He hesitates, then says only they will take part in the battle. Rue was most shocked by the news. He cannot believe they alone will take part in the fight. The Emperor, looking regretful, says this is exactly the case. They once maintained friendly relations with other races, but now that the hero has appeared, they have refused to support them. The Elder says he understands everything. The main character stands in stunned silence, trying to absorb the news and worrying they'll be all right because there are so few of them. From the conversation, he remembers the hero. He realizes Tia is now a hero and considers asking her for help, but the Earth Dragon says it won't work. Because this hero treats all monsters as enemies, she even attacks half-humans. Knowing Tia personally, the main character refuses to believe she would attack everyone indiscriminately. The head of the Fenrir family admits they have little chance of winning in this situation. The Emperor apologizes. Now Rue remembered that, before they left, Taiga had mentioned Tia's odd behavior. The hero asks Taiga if Tia has been acting strange lately, and Taiga admits it, noting that when they accept a request to fight monsters, Tia's expression changes beyond recognition, and he sometimes gets scared. Ryu can hardly believe his own words, because he remembers Tia used to be a real crybaby, and Taiga remembers that too. He still asks the main character whether he knows what might have happened to her, but the main character says he has no idea. Taiga suggests a heroic spirit may explain her behavior and says that would be good, but Ryu thinks the reason is different and explains why the girl hates monsters so much. On a mission and searching for the main character, Tia and Taiga cannot understand such an absurd request. A man is outraged. To make a weapon from the fangs of Fenrir, you must have the flame of guard and know how to obtain it. Those were the king's words when he told them that if they gathered all the materials, he would forge legendary weapons for them. Tiger says he heard the country's king is a skilled blacksmith. The man beside him says it's no surprise, and the right materials are needed to make a powerful weapon. Tia tells them to forget the weapon, but the girl behind her asks what the point of their visit is. Priestess Maria says Tia is a hero and is always in danger. That night, Gran on the hero's team joined her, and the priestess joined too. Gran agrees with Maria and says Tia needs a good weapon because she is a hero. Tiger suggests they go to the guild first, where they might find information on the materials they need, and the whole team agrees. Later, they went to the guild, but the people there looked at them strangely. The knight senses it and cannot tell what is happening. Everyone nearby stared at them with suspicion when Fenrir and Guard were mentioned, and when they asked about them, the locals fell silent and said nothing. Tia says something bad may have happened in this country. A cloaked stranger approaches the team. His face is hidden, and he asks if they really want to learn more about Fenrir and the legendary bird of Garda. The girl asks who he is. The young man is posing as an information dealer. He asks why the hero is interested in Fenrir and Guard. She explains the king told them they must bring Fenrir's fangs and Guard's flame to get weapons. Grant approaches an information dealer, says the dealer clearly knows something, and offers any amount for the information, but the merchant says he doesn't want money and asks to hear a story. About a month ago, a man arrived in this country with Fenrir and Garrett and helped put down the rebellion led by the king's younger brother. In short, he is now their country's hero. That makes no sense to Tia, since she is the hero. The merchant continues, saying rumors claim the hero hates monsters, but the hero is friends with Fenrir and Gerardard, contradicting the rumors, and the merchant fears their hero will just cut down Fenrir and Gerardard. If the merchant gives them more information, their hero will kill his allies from their country and then return to take revenge on them. Maria asks about this, which is why no one wants to tell them. The merchant replied vaguely. Taiga asks Tia what is wrong and why she is silent. The girl stands with her back to them and says nothing. She turned and said she would take care of this hero. The girl heads for the exit and thanks the informant. Taiga tries to stop her. Determined to destroy all the monsters, the girl leaves the guild and promises herself that as soon as this is over, Tia will find Ryu. Meanwhile, Ryu sits at the table with Lear and Karin, tired and lying down on the table, glad they are finally finished and he can take a break. The meeting made no decisions. The Dragon Emperor and the Elder kept discussing battle tactics, so he had nothing to do there. Lear suggests they take a walk in the palace. Karin immediately agrees to the girl's suggestion, and you have no objection. The main character thinks one should not roam the palace without warning someone first. Ryu opens the door to leave, and a maid greets him, which surprises him because he already saw her standing beside the Empress. When the maid asks where he is going, the main character is shocked and says they just wanted to explore the palace a bit, and the maid looks at them with suspicion. She immediately changes her expression and asks them to follow her. Karin is very pleased with the result. As the characters move forward, the man feels a strange, unexplained sensation, and she may have stood outside the door eavesdropping the whole time they were in the room. Sometime later, the mage shows them the dining room, library, and training area, where the knights are training. She leads them into the imperial garden. All three are delighted by the beauty, and I can't take my eyes off her. Karin says the garden looks great, Lear completely agrees. The main character says it is very beautiful here. The maid said she was glad the guests liked it, and the princess likes it here too. Ryu is unsure which princess it is, so he asks the maid if a princess is here, and she confirms that she is very important to their country, while Ryu says he understands everything but still has one question. Pointing at a column with a lock of hair sticking out, he asks who is hiding there. A little girl steps out of her hiding place and says he noticed her after all. All three are stunned to find a child standing in front of them. A girl walked up to the main character and stared at him. He can't tell why she is standing there, so he asks if she needs anything from him. The question leaves her stunned and unable to answer him. Trying to find an excuse, she comes up empty. Turning to his sword, she gets a brilliant idea. The girl asks for it, and Ryu immediately says he cannot give it to her, leaving everyone present silent for a moment. The little girl is surprised by his refusal and cannot understand why, so the main character explains that such things are not toys for children. 299. Those words enrage her, and she taps her foot on the floor while saying she is not a child. Ryu is at a loss about what's happening and gives the maid a blank look. She understands, apologizes, and says she'll call her parents right away. Guy says it's okay and he'll wait. He crouches down in front of her and says her parents are coming. Karin asks if the girl is lost. The girl grows angrier, begins to shake, and tells them not to mock her. Declaring she will take his sword by force, she lunges at the main character, but he defiantly dodges and prevents her from getting it. Confused, he watches as the girl starts screaming and demands he hand over his sword. The girl rushes back to grab the man's sword, but Ryu stops her again by running away. The main character notices the girl moves too fast for a child, yet she is too predictable. Refusing to take no for an answer, she holds out her hands to the man and demands what she wants, but he repeats that he will not do it and finally asks Lear and Karin for help. The girls won't interfere in their showdown with her. Lear says he's handling it himself, and Karin only asks the main character to play with her the same way later. Ryu realizes he can't expect any help from them. Angry, the girl starts shaking and screaming that he had no right to disobey her, and that makes her even angrier. Overcome with emotion, the girl shakes her clenched fists forcefully. Ryu already sees the sharp claws in front of him. He can't understand how it happened. The girl says he angered her and asks if he has any last words, then points at the man's face and tells him to take it. Seeing nails heading for his face, the man runs away while the princess slams into a column and hits her head. Stepping back to a safe distance, he watches her shake with anger, but grows worried and asks if she is all right because she is sitting on the ground and trembling. When the princess turns to face him, the main character sees her crying and says she isn't paying, and the man does not know what to do because he is actually to blame for her blow. The main character sits down beside her. The girl stays on the floor crying and says she does not understand why she cannot beat him since she is much stronger, and he tells her to calm down. He asks them to call a doctor. A voice behind apologizes for the wait. It was the May. She escorted the Empress. They are heading straight for them. The man cannot believe the Empress came here. Springing up from the floor, he walks over and asks what she left behind, since the maid said she would call her parents. Bowing before him, the Empress asks forgiveness for her daughter's bad behavior. His whole world is collapsing as he cannot understand how she could be her daughter. The Empress lifts her head and says, with regret, that he understood everything correctly. This is her daughter. The maid says her granddaughter is there, but the main character refuses to accept it, unable to see how she could be her granddaughter. He asks the maid why she did not stop the princess right away when she began misbehaving, and the maid looks away and says she does not know how to handle children. His brain finally gave out as he tried to work out who the girl's father could be, since her mother is the Empress. At last he realizes the girl on the floor before him is the heir to the throne. Ryu still refuses to accept that the girl who tried to steal his sword is a princess of the Dragon Empire. An elder appears around the corner and tells him he is always at the center of events. Ryu is surprised by his arrival, and the elder greets the maid as Tiamat, who says she is pleased to see him as well. The Fenrir clan leader did not understand what was happening here. After the elder was briefed on the case, he realized the girl wanted to steal Ryu's sword, but she insists it wasn't her fault, and he continued to dodge her attacks. If he had stayed still, she would have easily defeated him. Her grandmother can no longer tolerate such a disgrace and tells the girl to calm down. Then he tells her she has lost and asks her to accept it, since it looks like she will have to step up their daily training. The maid makes a 90-degree bow and repeatedly asks the main character for forgiveness, while Ryu waves it off, saying he shouldn't have done it and that he's fine, but Tiamat has one request for him. She asks him to help train the princess, places a hand on the princess's head, and leaves the man stunned, unable to believe what he's heard. He asks whether they cannot find someone stronger, but the maid says the princess would be afraid to arrive. When she is with him, she feels calmer. Her parents also wanted to ask him about it. Since she will inherit the throne, they want her to be ready. They are asking him urgently for help. Ryu says he agrees but fears being a poor teacher. An elder steps up behind him and lays a hand on his shoulder, urging him to agree, saying even dragons bowed before him and he still needs training. After a moment, Ryu agrees to help train the girl and asks everyone to look up. The princess's grandmother thanks him, but he isn't finished and asks for something in return. He put his hand on his chest and said that in return he wanted Tiamat to teach him too. The woman is unsure what to teach him, but the main character explains he wants to prepare better for battle and that her lessons will clearly help him. Smiling sweetly, the maid says she has no objection to these training sessions. The man is ecstatic and thanks her. Turning to Karin, he starts to tell them they can rest for now, but the girl interrupts him before he finishes and says she is not satisfied and will train too. Ryu can't understand why Karin would do that since it could be dangerous, but Karin says she wants to help her dad. She doesn't want to stay away forever, and the main character tries to calm her. The elder steps into the conversation and says he will personally take over the guard's training. Karin can hardly believe it and asks him whether that is true. Ryu asks if everything will be okay. The elder says that when the girl asks like that he cannot refuse her. She wants to get stronger and he will be happy to help. The leader of the Fenrir family steps up to Tiamat, offers her something and whispers into her ear. Her eyes narrow. She smiles at his suggestion and says that in that case they should start tomorrow. The elder still asks them not to kill him because of you, and the man standing next to him doesn't understand what is happening, but knows one thing for sure, it somehow applies to him. The next morning the maid sends the main character, flying with one blow. He falls to his knees. She tells him to get up because they're not finished yet. At the maid's voice, Ryu turns and realizes she is just a devil, and he remembers the elder is studying with Karin and already pictures the girl lying on the floor. Tiamat keeps scolding him, saying he could do some things but his movements are wasteful, so she tells him to conserve his energy because he tires quickly, and she also taught him a lesson with a slap. The maid adds that with such powers he cannot beat the dragon. The blow sends the man flying. He still manages to stay on his feet, even though it's very difficult. He remembers Karin and Lear are doing their best, so he can't give in to them. Determined not to stray from his goal, he believed he would grow stronger. Soon the maid sent him flying again. Later the woman says that's enough for today. The princess and the main character are relieved that it's finally over. Both are shaking and can no longer stand. Tiamat isn't finished and tells them to run another 100 laps around the site, leaving both surprised it isn't the end of the workout. A short while later, Ryu and the princess enter the dining room, utterly exhausted from training and with no strength left for anything. The maid standing behind Lear and Karin says she will monitor their nutrition starting today. She added that she will not accept objections and will be back soon. At Karin and Lear, they notice the men look unwell and ask if they are all right, but neither the main character nor the princess knows how to respond. Ryu and the girl exchange looks, and he admits even he finds it hard to stand, while she says the man's endurance surprised her. A few days later, princess, he attacks the man who keeps dodging. After one wrong move, Ryu grabs her hand, immobilizes her, and pins her to the floor so she cannot escape. The main character says he's tired, and the princess says she can keep going. Lear and Karin watch the training from the sidelines. The girl's grandmother tells her she moves too simply. Before attacking, she should think through her movements. At the Ryu's turn, he listens to the maid's criticism, and she says he moves well but reacts too slowly, and it might still work with the princess. If the enemy moves much faster, he will be in trouble, and he must always monitor the enemy's movements closely. Awkwardly scratching his head, Ryu admits he has no choice since she told him to, but Tiamat cuts him off and assures him everything is simple. By sensing the opponent's mana, he can tell where the opponent is moving, when to attack and when to retreat, and gain a much clearer read of the battle, including where the opponent will strike. Despite the maid's explanation, the man still didn't understand anything. She sighs and says it's hard to explain in words. She asks whether he felt any pressure when facing a strong opponent, and he remembers their first meeting with the king and the ominous aura he sensed. Seeing that the man remembered the feeling, the woman says that's good because he already has an idea, and once he has learned the lesson, she offers to go over the material he learned while unbuttoning her shirt. Confused, he doesn't understand what she's trying to do and tries to cover her eyes with her hands so she won't see anything unnecessary. The main character asks her to stop. Then he realizes something or someone has blocked the sun for him. Pulling his hands away, he sees a huge dragon in front of him blocking the sun. Suddenly, the princess's grandmother turns into a dragon and tells him that from now on he will only fight her in that form, and you can hardly believe she just said it. The woman asks the guy to defeat her and says he can use any weapon. Ryu learns that Tiamat will also join the battle. She steps closer and tells him he can attack her only after he dodges her grandmother's attacks, and Ryu is stunned, saying that sounds too cruel. Tiamat tells him the main character can only blame himself for choosing her as his teacher. The elder tells him the real training begins now and asks him to get ready. The maid flicks her tail and announces they're starting. The dragon's tail hit him and knocked him a short distance away. He had not expected such a rapid advance. Disguised as a dragon, a woman asks what the matter is and warns him that the dark dragon's attacks will be many times stronger, but the main character draws his sword from his bosom and says he knows himself. The girl suddenly runs out from behind and asks not to be forgotten. The man is taken by surprise and steps aside. The princess then tries to attack her grandmother. Circling the dragon, she tries to confuse her. Ryu stands to the side, unsure what he should do. He must dodge their blows, because if he tries to get closer, a girl and her grandmother will attack him immediately. Tiamat noticed Ryu standing motionless and lost in thought, shouted that it was impossible to reflect during a fight, accused him of forgetting their conversation, and reminded him to feel his mana. These words snapped the man back to his senses, and the maid then covered the field with dust and told him he could not defeat his opponent by relying only on sight. Later, he has almost no strength left, breathing hard and fighting to stay upright while focusing on his opponent. The dragon studies him, doubts this is truly his limit, and admits that for a human he produced a solid result. She remembers her recent conversation with Fenrir. The head of the Fenrir family told the maid Ryu might be the right person. At present, the woman has not noticed any outstanding abilities in the main character, and others think the elder may have been mistaken in his proposal. After a moment, the boy's aura changes, and like his expression, the elder and the dragon now feel the protagonist's power and notice that something has definitely changed in him. The head of the Fenrir family smiles contentedly, and the maid thinks it's worth a try. To provoke Ryu into a fight, she asks whether that's all he can do. The eager princess leaps into the fray, seeing a perfect chance for herself, while Tiamat keeps going and asks the main character if she should just kill him. The girl is surprised by the words and stops, not understanding what her grandmother means. The dragon goes on, warning that in his current state, the man will still be killed by the dark dragon. She can kill him without causing unnecessary suffering. Tiamat bent her head over him and loomed over him. The maid, dressed as a dragon, tells the main character this is the end as he stands at the bottom beside her. Standing apart from the man, the princess asks her grandmother to stop. Ryu still does not understand why it turned out that way, since he had wanted so much to catch up with his friends, and the main character cannot accept that everything he did was in vain. A hand settles on his shoulder. His behavior changes instantly, and he vows not to accept this, saying he will fight to the end and will not give up easily. The maid senses his determination and kicks him, raising so much dust that visibility drops to zero. The gust from the blow nearly knocks the princess off her feet. He realizes the dragon's leg was only a couple of centimeters from his body, and he finally understands. For a moment, manner let him see the blow's path because dust hid everything past his hand, and only because of that he managed to dodge and survive. Maybe now he could sense the opponent's mana. The maid shifted back to human form and congratulated him for finally sensing the opponent's mana. Curious about how he judged the woman's acting, she still hopes the main character did not think she really intended to kill him. The man sighs in relief and says that's how it was, but Tiamat adds that he cannot say everything was just a game. The words leave the man in shock, and the maid says that despite everything, the main character handled her ordeal successfully, and asks him to accept her congratulations, causing him to blush as he thanks the princess's grandmother. The princess stood a little apart, waving her arms and causing a fuss as she explained why she did not know anything about it, and they would keep training until she passed the test as well. Tiamat tells his granddaughter not to be so selfish and to stop acting up, but the main character interrupts and asks if the princess didn't pass the test too. The grandmother and granddaughter turn to him, puzzled, not understanding his words and waiting for him to explain. He points to the button on his vest that was about to fall off. He says the girl still hurts him and asks if her job was to get him pregnant, and the maid, holding her head, says that formally it was exactly that. Still, she tells her the princess has died. The girl can't believe it, and her eyes begin to shine with happiness. Happy with her small victory, she beams. Ryu, the main character, pats her head and says the princess did well. The girl enjoys Ryu's praise and laughs that she naturally passed because he could too. Lear and Karin stood a little apart but watched the fight the whole time and said it was amazing. To celebrate, they offered to eat together. The main character, seeing the girls, called out their names joyfully. Tiamat stands a little further away, watching them quietly and peacefully, enjoying their conversation. Later that night, the elder and Tiamat drank together. The head of the Fenrir family never thought they would drink together again. The room is dim and cozy, their faces barely visible, and he remembers when they couldn't be quiet for a minute, while a maid just laughs and says at least they always had something to do. The elder asks the woman how her training with the main character is going. The match nods and says it's absolutely fine. Besides, Ryu is making progress, and the elder laughs proudly at the man, saying he never thought the match would ever be able to afford a man. The woman admits she never expected to train anyone. The head of the Fenrir family says that someday the main character will defeat them too. Pausing briefly, she says anything is possible, but she is glad the little girl is following the Ryu's example. She still wonders whether she can arrange the princess's marriage to Mr. Ryu. The elder choked on those words. The news was astonishing. He starts the coffee. He asks Tiamat whether she is drunk or unwell, and reminds her that marrying the dragon princess to a human is not a reasonable choice and cannot happen. Grinning, she says it's hard but not impossible, and if the main character becomes stronger than them, others will recognize him. As he said, Mr. Ryu is the right person. The elder sighs and agrees with the woman, saying someone he knows had a hand in it. The Fenrir family head frowns and says an ordinary person cannot have such power. He still wonders why Ryu is the one, since many have tried to gain his power by contract, and each of them met a terrible death. Tiamat grows serious and insists the choice is still his and no one can stop him. If he finds out about the main character, they'll be in serious trouble because Ryu has gained a power no one has been able to master. The elder asks if anyone else knows about this. She says she doesn't think so since he has been missing for many years, then asks the elder how they finally met him. The Fenrir family head promises to tell her everything when the time comes. Ryu has a hidden power no one knows about. Training with Miss Tiamat continued, and in a staged duel the man rushed in, told her to take his blow, and knocked the maid back, yet she remained on her feet. After the fight, Tiamat tells Mr. Ryu he has grown much stronger, and when he asks the woman if it is true, she confirms that his skills have clearly improved. She is amazed at how fast he is developing. He cries out in joyful surprise and asks again if it is true. Proud of himself, he knows his hard training is paying off, and he might already be able to damage the dark drag. Tiamat says that because his results improved, there will be no training tomorrow. The woman looks happy, but the man looks indignant. He does not understand why the workout was canceled and asks his teacher about it. She tells him he trains every day and his body is very tired, so resting now will help more than ever, and rest is part of the workout. Reporting this to the elder, she asks why he spends no time with Lear and Karin, while the girls staged a duel and the head of the Fenrir family is watching from a short distance. Liking the idea, the main character agrees, and remembering they never walked around the city, thinks they might see the sights. The next morning in Mr. Ru's bedroom, he sleeps peacefully but feels someone in the room. As he sleeps, the main character hears a voice call his name and tell him to wake up. He does not know who it is, but he reluctantly opens his eyes to see the person. Ryu opened his eyes to find Lear standing over him telling him to wake up. He was surprised the girl had come to wake him herself. Lear does not answer his questions, but hurries him along, saying that Karin is already waiting for them and asking him to get dressed quickly. He had promised the girls he would take them for a walk today. Sometime later in the main shopping area, people are busy with their tasks and not rushing, and the heroes are there too. He asks the girls where to go. Karin thinks about it, but Lear says he doesn't know the city, so Karin has no suggestions. Remembering that Karin was looking at the ribbons, the main character suggests they go to the store. The girl can hardly believe it and asks if it's true, and Lear says it's a great idea. Ryu turns back and asks the other person if she agrees with his proposal. After that, he gives the address princess. The young woman is pleased she went with the guys and stands proudly with her hands on her hips and a smirk. The girl says of course she agrees and will show them the city since they do not know it, and they will still be grateful to her. Ryu did not expect to walk with the princess and remembered his earlier talk with Tiamat during training. Stunned, he asked the woman again whether she really intended to take the princess with her. The girl's grandmother, wearing a serious expression, replies that he understood everything correctly and explains she was asked to attend the meeting. Since there is no one to look after the princess, she asks him for that favor. The main character then asks about the other servants, but the woman says they cannot handle the princess's violent temper. She encourages him, saying he'll be fine. The moment is tense. Despite Miss Tiamat's words, he would still fly if anything happened to the young lady. For inspiration, the princess asks everyone to follow her. They arrive at the jewelry store at this time, and the seller bows to them. They are the only people in the shop. The man greets them and asks whether they want help picking an assortment. The young woman explains her friends want to buy jewelry, so she brought them here. Karin's eyes sparkle as she admires the jewels, and Lear matches her delight, surprised by the amount of jewelry in the window. Lion Karin admired the jewelry. Suddenly, she noticed the princess watching the girls. Ryu suddenly asked the girl if she wanted to see the bright decorations together. The princess was startled. Turning away, she said haughtily that she was a princess and had everything. Ryu smiled and added that girls like jewelry. The princess looked at the young man in silence, then asked if she could ask him something. Ryu was surprised but said nothing. With a serious look, the princess asks the young man why he wants to become stronger. Ryu is surprised and cannot say a word. He explains the girl asked him about it so suddenly. The princess ordered him to answer simply. Ryu scratches his cheek and says he wanted to be on par with his friends and smiles awkwardly. He says they both got rare martial professions, but he was not as lucky and fell behind them, so he wanted to become stronger. The princess asks whether the young man sought strength because his career, like hers, is unsuccessful, and suddenly Ryu talks about a mentor. Surprised, the princess asks what this means and whether it is really just because of the mentor. She cries out and asks whether she really lost to an ordinary mentor. Ryu shouted that he had been training hard. He says he gained power only because of the latter. Without meeting Lear, he would have remained a simple shepherd and never seen other countries. The princess is surprised and asks about those countries. She asks Ryu where he has been and what the people are like, and when she asks if they'd have fun, he says he hasn't traveled much and has only been to one country. Ryu said the girl is a princess and asks if she doesn't have to travel a lot. The princess refused and said she had never left the empire, which surprised Ryu. The princess gripped her dress and said that because she was a princess, she could not just leave the country and felt like she was in a cage. Ryu looked at the girl and said he understood her. The princess grew angry and asked the young man what he meant. She screamed, demanding to know how to make sense of this and whether the young man was part of their royal family. She doubts the young man really thinks she is so easy to understand. Ryu smiled sweetly and said he was exactly like the princess. Never leaving his village, he learned everything from his friends. Their freedom to travel made him envious. When they brought back souvenirs, his jealousy grew. He asks the stunned princess whether she truly feels the same. She looked surprised. She suddenly screamed that it was exactly like that, saying her parents and grandmother always care for the princess, but even custody has a limit, and she really wants to see the world and visit every country. She wants to discover a place no one else has seen, earn praise from others, meet different people, and try different foods. She mentions one more thing and, sounding unsure, adds that it's possible to find friends, and although she can handle things on her own, it's not that simple. Ryu figured she was trying to make friends with them. Then he called Karin and asked him to look at the new ribbons they had just chosen. Did you ask the girl whether she had already chosen the ribbons? He said they suited her very well. Karin asked the young man whether they really looked cute. Turning to the princess, she asked what she and Ryu had been talking about. The girl flinched at the unexpected question. Turning away, the princess said sheepishly that there was nothing special. Ryu smiled and said the princess really wants to be friends with them. The girl looked very confused and panicked. The girl screamed and demanded to know who had let him say that, and Karin was very surprised to hear it. Karin asked with a puzzled look whether they were already friends. The princess was very surprised. The princess asked Karin what she meant. After a pause, Karin said that, to put it simply, they eat together and train together too. She was delighted and asked whether that meant they were already friends. The princess shouted that this was definitely not the case. Karin says her dad and sister are family, but she'd be happy to make friends and asks whether the princess would like to be friends with her. The girl was very upset. Taken aback by the question, the princess stepped back from the girl and tried to explain herself. Ryu and Lior exchanged glances and smiled. Ryu said she'd be happy if they became friends. Lior barely sighed and said she didn't have many friends either. Our Karin looked serene. The princess seemed a little tense. The princess screamed that she agreed to be friends with them and that they could even call her by her first name. Karin was delighted and said they should pick a ribbon for a rake too. The princess looked surprised, asked about the ribbon, and said she already had one. Karin smiled, took the girl's hand, and told Okada to come with them. It will be proof of their friendship. She asked the stunned girl if that was really what friends did, and Oka looked very surprised and pressed her lips together. Oscar responded positively. Ryu and Lear stood to the side. Lear smiled, saying they looked like they were having a lot of fun. Ryu said it was good they became friends so quickly. Suddenly, Ryu asked Lear why she had not bought anything, saying they had money from selling materials, so she shouldn't be shy. He shows her a necklace with a beautiful pendant and asks if she can use it. Lear replied that the chains looked like a collar and that she did not like them. The girl says sadly that she would only get in the way in battle. The young man offers to treat her. Ryu suddenly looks away, surprised. Draping a scarf over the lyre, he asks if the scarf is okay. Surprised, the girl asks whether it is really a scarf, and Ryu says that if wearing it around the neck is inconvenient, she can tie it around her arm since it suits Lear's black hair. Ryu says if a girl doesn't like it, they can watch something else. Lear says everything is fine. Suddenly, Lear smiles and thanks Ryu from the bottom of his heart. After a while, a group of men leave the shop, and the seller thanks them for their purchases. The girls ask Ryu where they will go next. Lear asks about other popular shops, and the princess tells them to follow her. Smiling, she says she's sure they'll like it. Then she suddenly stops. Ryu asks the girl what happened, and the princess looks surprised. Looking up at the sky, she sees a huge dragon. It grins and stares straight down at Ryu's group. A maid suddenly appears before Ryu. He recognizes her as Mrs. Tiamat and asks what happened. Tiamat gives them a serious look and says they have problems. Lady Tiamat warns the seal in the cave of the Dragon of Darkness has weakened too much. It looks like the dragon will break out sooner than they expected. Ray, you were scared and asked what it meant. Tiamat said preliminary forecasts predicted he would break out today, so they should prepare. Ryu was very surprised and panicked, then asked whether it would really be today. Then there was silence, and someone asked if it was really starting. You frowned, thinking it was too sudden, but there was no other way out. Turning to Mrs. Tiamat, he asks to see the seal. The girl agrees and says that's why she was looking for them. She suggests they go back to the castle, and then everyone will go to the cave together. A wall split open in the huge dark cave. The monster's tail was visible, darting across the stone floor. The monster grinned and said he would be free soon. A bright flame burned in his eyes. He was glad he would soon get what he wanted. A huge dragon crossed the bright, clear sky. Lear said the long-awaited hour seemed to have come. Karin was serious and agreed then. Ryu tensed up. Turning to Lady Tiamat, he asked whether the girl had already fought the dark dragon, and Tiamat looked very surprised. Miss Tiamat said she was young then and could not fight, but her relatives could, and one of them was very strong. Even Tiamat finds this dark dragon a formidable opponent, and he is unsure he can handle it. At that moment, Ryu tensed, and Tiamat noticed. Ms. Tiamat told Ryu not to clutter his mind with unnecessary thoughts. Though he's human, the young man is far from weak. He's achieved a lot during this time, and she tells him that if he can't believe himself, he should believe her. Tiamat confidently told the young man to believe in himself because he is strong. Ryu froze in surprise, then agreed confidently. The princess grabbed his head and said she would try too because she couldn't take all the glory herself. Ryu said he didn't need any of it. They soon arrive at a huge dark cave where many magicians are gathered deep inside, casting magic to form a seal. A man appeared suddenly and asked the magicians how things were. The male magician called him the emperor. Ryu asked Ms. Tiamat who these people were. Ms. Tiamat said these men were the empire's spellcasters. They feed the seal with magic so it lasts longer. A man suddenly screamed that the seal would not hold any longer, and another caster said the dragon would awaken in a few minutes. The emperor approached the casters and said he accepted their report. The spellcasters told him to leave the rest to them. A strange black liquid then began to flow between the stones. Moments later, the seal collapsed, and everyone was horrified and stunned. Even the emperor could not hide his emotions, and the magicians were shocked by the destroyed seal. The emperor ordered everyone to evacuate at once because the dragon was about to break free. Suddenly, the whole cave began to shake. A strange liquid poured more forcefully from the crack, and then someone said he had waited so long for this day, leaving Lear, Karin, and Ryu stunned. A huge three-headed dragon suddenly appeared before them, its body covered in strange markings. After examining the people, he reported dragonites and Fenrir among them. The dragon saw a man among them. The dragon asked whether the young man was really a hero. Surprised, Ryu asked what it meant and said he was no hero, while the emperor ordered his men to prepare for battle and stay alert. The dragon said they were all like annoying insects. He says he's not interested in any of them, then he casts a spell. He orders everyone to leave. Suddenly, a group has magical seals. The men shouted and demanded to know what it was. They were about to retreat at once. Then the group of dragonites in Fenrir disappeared. Ryu was stunned that they had all disappeared. The princess and Lear immediately began calling for their father and mother, and Lear returned to the dragon to ask where he had sent them. The monster said he had just sent them to another dimension and now wants to fight them. It's all because they are this boy's band. He laughs and asks them to make him laugh. A massive wolf tried to smash the stone wall, but the large chunks of the wall did not break off immediately. The man said he couldn't get through. Grandma Lear said it looked like dragon magic created this space. The girl replied it was very powerful magic. The emperor said we must hurry because Lear is there alone. The man told the wolf to take his time. They trained hard for this day because they will cope. We need to figure out how to get out of here. A black snake slithered across the ground. The blonde-haired girl shouted to the man to be careful. Suddenly the man dodges and the snake's strike misses. Many dark snakes crawl on the ground and he looks down. He called these snakes a creature of darkness. Surrounded, they knew the situation could not get worse, and the dark dragon had wasted no time. Now the huge dark dragon was charging a magical attack from his magic seal, casting a spell. Without warning, he spat out a large amount of dark liquid, and the young man dodged nimbly. Surprised, the dragon said the young man had dodged again. It ordered him to stop running and attacking. Ryu shouted he didn't need to be asked twice. Ryu charged the dragon and struck it. The dragon's failure to dodge surprised him. Ryu realized the monster had deliberately exposed itself at that moment. A strange liquid appeared behind Ryu's back. Lady Tiamat shouted a warning to Ryu to be careful because he can summon dark creatures from blood. A dark snake suddenly appeared. Miss Tiamat warned Ryu not to attack without thinking because he would be at a disadvantage. You chopped up the creature of darkness, snake, and he clucked that he understood what Miss Tiamat meant. Tiamat realized the dark dragon had become much stronger, and a single scratch on his arm could create creatures of darkness. If he is not killed with one blow, the situation will be terrible. They will be overwhelmed by numbers and all die. Miss Tiamat looked intently at the young man and realized that in this situation, they had his strength. The next moment, the dragon launched a magical attack and challenged them with it. It is casting a powerful spell. Ryu swung his sword toward him and tried to say they were still together, but he ran out of time. Many magical seals appeared around the dark dragon. Ryu, Alika, Karin, and Lear were shocked and frightened. Several seals launched a huge attack and rushed straight at the Ryu's groups. Surprised, the latter said they would not dodge such an attack, and since he had just woken up, it was unclear where he got so much strength. The dragon asked the people what was wrong and whether they had come to kill him. Ryu thought that doing nothing would kill them and that attacking would only create more creatures of darkness, so he doesn't know what to do. Miss Tiamat suddenly called to Ryu, urging him not to rush, to think carefully about the plan, and to do what he can. Mrs. Tiamat considered it, realizing that although Ryu and the others had become stronger, they still lacked combat experience, and she hopes the Emperor and the others will make it back in time. She must protect them until then. Princess Oka suddenly appears and says you only need to kill the shadows with a single blow. Smiling, she puts a hand on her chest and tells everyone to hand it to her. Reincarnated as a dragon, the girl says she will simply kill him before he activates the spells. Mrs. Tiamat suddenly shouted to Asuka to wait. In an instant, Aluka shifts into a tiny, very cute dragon, and Ryu realizes it is Aluki's dragon form. Oka rushed straight at the dragon, shouting that the dragon was finished. At that moment, Lady Tiamat also shifted into a dragon. The dark dragon grinned suddenly, called it stupid, activated the magic seal, and froze the oaks in midair. She realized the huge dark dragon was using silent magic. Afraid, Ryu shouts Shoutsoki's name as a huge explosion suddenly erupts. Oka reaches to wipe dust from her eyes, then suddenly opens them and freezes. Tiamat's body lies in front of her. The girl is unconscious and shows no sign of life. Ryu shouts Tiamat's name as Yuka trembles with fear, and the dark dragon questions whether Tiamat sacrificed herself for others and calls it foolish. Brushing Tiamat aside with his tail, he he told her to go away. Suddenly, Wonka called to her grandmother and flew to her body. The Tiamat felt frozen by a paralysis spell and now realizes she must get up. The dark dragon doubts they deserve the name heroes. The previous hero was far better than them. He laughs and asks each of them to try to make him laugh. Lear, Karin, and Ryu were very tense. They didn't know what to do now. A huge dark snake rushes in from the side toward the huge wolf, but the wolf pins it to the ground and destroys it. He warned the other wolves that everyone was trampling them and it would never end. The man thinks it's bad. They were too late. You and the guys need to hurry. He knows he has to come up with something fast before it's too late. In his mind, he urges Ryu and the others to hold on as long as they can. Now the huge dark dragon praised his opponents and ordered them to attack him. Oko tried to bring her grandmother to her senses. She told her to hold on and kept calling her grandmother. Right then, the dark dragon said that if the interference were removed, you might become serious again. The main character immediately called out to Ahaka and Tiamat by name. The princess turned and saw a magical attack racing straight toward them. Akka pressed against Tiamat and squeezed her eyes shut. A huge explosion followed. After a while, Akka opened his eyes and saw Ryu and Lefir in the dust. Ryu held the dagger in front of him and was very tense. Akka stared at the young man and the girl, clearly frightened, and was about to speak when Ryu shouted and told the girl to calm down. Ryu turned to Oska and asked her to remember why she was there. Oska said Grandma was hurt because of her. Ryu said that if the girl died, Tiamat would cry because all her efforts to protect her had failed. Ryu said, looking confident, that all hope now rested on them, so Tiamat defended them with all her might. Odiko was very surprised. Ryu smiled and told the girl to fight with him. He called to Alinka again. The girl looked surprised. Moments later, Tiamat woke and tried to speak, and Oka reassured her grandmother that she would not act rashly again. Oka joined Lear, Karin, and Ryu and said they would all fight together from now on. Everyone was very determined. The dark dragon laughed, saying he was delighted by their pathetic attempts and ordered them to show everything they could. He stretches out his hand, covered in countless magic seals, as the Ryus group heads straight toward the dark dragon. You leap side to dodge the monster's attacks. Karin stood beside the dragon, prepared to strike, then unleashed a huge surge of power directly at it. The dark dragon reactivated the magic seal, grinned, asked whether the girl had really decided to attack him with fire, snapped his fingers, said they would get rid of her first, and began casting a spell. A magical seal suddenly appears beneath the girl, and huge dark tentacles erupt from it. She notices them immediately. Ryu sees them too and shouts to Karin to be careful. She tried to dodge and flew the other way, but the dark tentacles kept coming toward her. When a tentacle reached for Karin's leg, Lear cut it with her paw, saving Karin from death. Lear landed and asked Karin if she was okay. Karin, pleased and nodding, thanked her sister for saving her. The dark dragon grinned and said it would try to attack next. Ryu and Ojuka rushed straight at the monster, and Okasha shouted she would not allow it. Instantly, the dark dragon activated a magic seal directly in front of him and blocked Ryu and Oki's attack. The dark dragon dismissed the attack as useless, then swept in with a wide strike while Oeka and Ryu tried to dodge. Ryu and Agoka jumped back and grew serious, leaving him unsure and very tense. Ryu thought Tiamat had warned him to avoid his spells at all costs. Simple attacks won't hurt him, and he will summon creatures of darkness from his wounds. Ryu can't see how they can defeat such a monster. With the dark dragon distracted by Karin, Lear, and Orinka returning to the fight, Ryu recalls his TMI training and watches Lyra's battle with the dragon closely, convinced it must have a weakness. Moments later, the dark dragon grinned as dust swirled around it, and Ryu had a sudden insight, staring at the dragon and thinking that using magic reading might help. The dark dragon's tail ornament suddenly lit up, and Ryu, terrified, watched closely as he activated the magic seals. A magic seal appears on the ground, but Lear evades it, and Oka also fights him. You thought it couldn't be, but if it was true, there was no choice. He takes out a pen, turns to Lear and Karin in his mind, and says he has a question for them. He explains his plan, and Lear and Karin are very surprised and ask what the young man means, and Lear warns that if they fail, he must know whether the young man understands how dangerous it is. Ryu is certain they can handle it together. If anything happens, he trusts they will protect the young man. Lear and Karin were taken aback, and Ryu continues, saying he believes in them and wants to try to carry out the plan. Lear clenches her fangs, says she understands, and suggests they go ahead. Karin says she will try too. Akka says she will try too, but Ryu interrupts and asks Okuda to listen to him. The dragon asks if they have decided to act and whether they are really sure he would allow it. Then he activates the magic seal, says it is not like that, and casts a spell. Suddenly, Lear jumps up and finds himself beside the dark dragon. The dark dragon believed Lear had broken the spell. Smiling, he says it's some kind of fast dog, but he can't dodge in the air at all, and activates the magic seal, aiming it at the liars. A sudden magical current rises and fully engulfs the dark dragon. The dragon looked around in surprise, asked whether they had really limited the scope to the guard's flame, then smiled and said they were fools who were only playing into his hands. Looking up, he sees Oroka appear in the open space and charge straight at the dark dragon. Akka slams headfirst into the dark dragon's body, staggers and grows confused, can't understand why the geared flame failed, and looks at Odika expecting to see only bones. He suddenly notices a feather in her mouth protecting her. Earlier, Ryu turned to Oska while Astrid had taken Karin's pen. With that pen, Oska will not take fire damage. The feather has been kept safe, so Oska does not have to worry. Ryu told Ugyuka the dark dragon's magic is strong, but you only need to stop the dragon from activating it. He also explained where his magic came from. The dark dragon tapped the ground and said it was very interesting. He asked whether they had truly decided to attack him again. Grinning, the dark dragon says he'll send her to his grandmother. The monster activates the magic seal. Oka smirks and says the only fool here is the dark dragon. The next moment, the dark dragon feels a sharp pain and looks away to see his severed tails. Lear cut off the dark dragon's tail with her sharp claws. Ryu said the tail was the source of the dragon's magic. The dark dragon knew the group had planned this from the start, laughed, said he understood everything, and asked whether they thought they could take away his magic. At once the severed tail twisted, and a swarm of dark snakes poured out, and the dark dragon sent them on, saying his creatures would handle the rest. Laughing, he said they needed to move forward, and told Ryu and his team to cheer him up a little more. He drives them to fight harder and harder until they reach the limits of their strength. That's exactly what he wanted. The dark dragon suddenly looks around in surprise and realizes something is wrong because someone is missing from the group. A sudden memory of Ryu makes him realize the hero is not here. Watching Lur attack the dark dragon, he sees it dodge, and the dragon suspects Ryu is up to something. He shouts at the hero, demanding to know where he is and to see him. The next moment, Ryu steps out from behind the lyre and says he is here. Grinning, Ryu's blade begins to glow. The dark dragon studies the glowing blade and realizes he has infused it with magic. All this time, he had been gathering magical power. Grinning, the dark dragon says he has been looking for this for so long, a real hero, and at that moment Ryu screams, threatens the dragon and attacks. The young man's blade striking the dragon's body triggers a massive explosion. A huge gust of wind nearly knocks Karin and Lyra off their feet. Alaka sees a huge blast of air and smoke after the explosion and strains to make out the main character and the dragon. The next moment, the dust cleared to reveal a dark figure lying on the ground, unconscious but still showing signs of life. Oka, Lear, and Karina watched as Ryu stared at the dark dragon's body and suddenly asked whether they had actually won. The dark dragon's head shows no sign of life. It suddenly dawns on him. Ryu turns to the side and sees Lear, Karina, and Akka there. Rushing to the young man, the girls celebrated that they had won, while everyone happily repeated that they had defeated the dark dragon. Ataka went straight to Tiamat and told her she would help right away. At that moment, when you notice something inside the dark dragon's body, he began to twitch his lips and shift slightly. The dark dragon called it a good punch with incredible power, and even Ryu was able to defeat him, the dragon of darkness. He asks for his reward for his efforts, and the dragon calls the young man a hero and says his knowledge of magic will do. Ryu wonders whether the dragon really won't fight anymore and tells the dark dragon he didn't fight it for the reward. Ryu asks the dragon to explain his goal and why he wanted to fight the hero so badly. A dark dragon lies on the ground. The dragon said he only wanted to fight a strong opponent. His only goal was to find out how strong he was. To do that, he needed a suitable opponent because people came here in drove. No one could hold out for long, and the dark dragon realized only a hero could match him. Everyone began to fear him, even the heroes, so they decided to seal him. Ru, Lear, Oka, and Ryu were stunned. Using his last strength, the dark dragon said he only wanted to find someone who could match him. The dark dragon says being born with great power is a real curse. The young man is taken aback by the dragon's words. Ryu remembered his comrades saying they had grown much stronger and were setting off on a journey. Unable to fight, Ryu had to stay in the village. Ace, they said goodbye and asked him to look after the village animals. Ryu clenched his fist, thinking about the dark dragon's loneliness. The dark dragon asked what was wrong and ordered the young man to say what he wanted, and when the young man could think of nothing, the dragon told him to just finish him off. so you interrupt and say you have decided everything. Smiling, he speaks to the dragon of darkness, points to himself, and invites it to be friends. Surprise hit Lear, Oka, and Karin, and the dark dragon was surprised too. Lear shouts at Ryu and asks what he is carrying. The dark dragon asked the young man what he meant. Ryu said he understood him better than anyone. Though powerful, the dark dragon felt very lonely. Ryu drooped slightly and put his hand over his chest. Lear and Karin looked at Ryu with deep sadness. The young man walked up to the dragon and told Ryu they had defeated him. Ryu holds out his hand to the dark, lying dragon, says they are equals, and offers to be friends. Ryu smiles and asks the dark dragon to grant his wish, and the dragon, surprised and silent, is about to answer when Osaka interrupts and says she is against it. Oscar said the dark dragon had killed many people and injured her grandmother. She refuses to be friends with that creature. If they forgive him, the dark dragon could start killing again. She points to the dark dragon's reclining head. Ryu said that after listening to the story, he realized the dark dragon would no longer kill. Oka was about to speak, but Tiamat interrupted her. Examining her body, the lady says they defeated the dark dragon, and the spell on her has fallen away, and Odika rejoices and rushes into his grandmother's arms. T then told Ryu that in the world of monsters, only the strongest survive, so the choice is up to Ryu. Ryu thought it over and said that if the dark dragon turned evil again, they could defeat him. If they could beat him now, they could do it again. Turning to Yuka, he says they may not trust him, but asks whether she doesn't believe him, and she tenses up. Oka remembers every moment with Ryu. She turns away and says she will agree only this once, but if anything goes wrong, it will be on the young man's conscience. Ryu thanks her. Ryu turns to the dark dragon and asks for his answer, and the dragon laughs, calling it a strange wish. Agreeing, he asks the young man to allow the healing. Then a bright glow pours from his hand, and the dragon points at the young man. The dark dragon says it will prove their friendship. A bright glow pours into the young man's body. Ryu is stunned when the dark dragon reveals he put part of his soul into the young man, then vanishes after saying they will see each other soon, leaving the main character shocked by the disappearance. His body collapsed and the young man fell to the ground. Lear rushed straight to the young man. After a while, Ryu regains consciousness and finds himself lying on someone's lap, realizing he had been unconscious. He asks where he is, and the girl says he has finally woken up. Surprised, Ryu sees and the girl smiles sweetly. Ryu says they haven't seen each other in a long time, then asks if she has actually woken up, and it turns out the girl recovered, with saying she has but can only talk to the young man in this world. Ryu then told the young man he was being too reckless. He was stunned. Bertessi said the young man was repeatedly near death in the dragon battle and during training. Wanting to get stronger isn't wrong, but he's taking far too many risks. You understand what the girl said about training, and realize that it was who lent him strength. The main character said he understood and would be more careful in the future, and smiled, glad to hear that. Ryu then said the dark dragon planned to put part of his soul into it. Agrees, saying that's exactly right and that the egg is that way, and points directly at him. Ryu looked at the egg and asked whether it was really the dark dragon's egg containing his soul, and said it looked beautiful. Smiled and said the dragon of darkness had not been evil at first. Originally a golden dragon always seeking new knowledge, he became a dragon of darkness after learning forbidden magic, remaining otherwise ordinary, but with an unusually strong soul. Ryu said he understood everything. Adds that Ryu is very kind and then grins. She suggests Ryu may have spared the dark dragon because Yura is a dragon too. Ryu studies her carefully and realizes he doesn't want to take anyone's life so easily. Will reply that was why she liked the young man. Bert takes the egg and says they'll get back to the subject. She asks you to take a closer look. The young man is surprised to see a small dragon inside the egg. Bert says he is rebuilding his body inside the egg. Were you asked if he will really come to life someday? Or did you agree and tell the young man not to worry because she would look after this dragon? After telling Ryu it was time for them to say goodbye, he hesitated and began to interrupt her. He asked when could leave the young man's body. Was very surprised. Ryu said Yura has always been here alone, and he feels sad to realize she is very lonely. Yura said she is not lonely. Ryu feels very comfortable and safe inside, so she asks the young man not to worry. He asks if the girl could still come out if he becomes a demon lord. Gates is frightened and shudders. Replies that she can get out. Ryu is happy, but the girl says there is no need. The demon lord is a powerful monster who commands other demons. Warning that Ryu must never become one, she suggests they end their conversation for now. Ryu asks the girl to stop. They smile sadly and say they will be able to talk to you later. The young man calls the girl, but she does not hear. Some time later, the young man wakes up. Everyone stands happily around Ryu's bed. Miss Tiamat says she is glad Ryu is okay. Surprised, Ryu asks where they are. Lear said that after Ryu fell, they met their grandparents and everyone returned safely to the castle. Ryu realizes he must have been unconscious and thanks everyone for their help. Tiamat said the young man still hasn't fully recovered and should rest. Lear tells him to call her if he feels unwell. Ryu agrees and tells the girls to rest too. Ryu is left alone. The young man is relieved Yura is safe. It looks like she forced him out of the dream, and he still cannot understand why he should not become a demon lord. Yura realized it was exactly like that. If Ryu becomes the demon lord, she will be able to leave this space. That power will make the young man very lonely, forcing him to sacrifice all his friends. Thinking of Ryu, she wonders if the main character can handle it. Soon the city held a celebration, and everyone joyfully ate, drank, danced, and sang. Rejoicing at the defeat of the Dragon of Darkness, they emptied their cups and blessed the Dragon Emperor and Lord Ryu. Smiling, Lear walked up to Ryu and said the young man was very popular now, and Ryu agreed that people in the city are not giving him a pass. After a while, Ryu, Karin, and Lear arrived at the Emperor's palace. The Emperor asked them to allow him to thank them again. Aishin said that without their help, the evil dragon could not have been defeated. The Emperor asks what she wants as a reward. Ryu grew frightened and said he should not. Smiling, the Emperor tells the young man not to be shy, saying he won't let them leave without a reward, so they can ask for anything they want. Ryu thinks that even though the Emperor says this, he doesn't understand what to ask for and has no ideas at all. Ryu asks what he can ask for, and the Emperor answers that the young man may ask for anything his heart desires, such as treasures, artifacts, or the right to live in a palace. Ryu thinks it over as Miss Tiamat smiles, apologizes for interfering, and offers an idea for the reward. After a moment, she asks the young man why he would not choose her as his reward, grinning while Ryu, Agaka, Lear, and Karin look very surprised and ask what she means. Lear asks whether Mrs. Tiamat truly wants to marry him. Karin asks whether Tiamat is going to marry Dad. Oka asks what Grandma is talking about. You laugh nervously and say the Emperor surely won't agree to this. Suddenly, the Emperor and his wife say they don't mind at all. The Emperor asks Ryu what he'll say, noting it would be nice to have a dragon as a wife. Ryu was confused, surrounded by his teammates. The young man stares at Mrs. Tiamat in panic and asks why she's doing this. Tiamat covers her mouth with her hand and asks what she said. Abruptly, the Emperor asked the young man whether he truly disliked the proposal. The Emperor asks if Ryu could take Lady Tiamat's claws. Surprised, Ryu asks the Emperor what he means by claws. The Emperor agrees and says dragon claws and scales are used to make strong weapons and simple armor that can improve their equipment. The young man may want something else, so he tells the Emperor it will do and turns to Lady Tiamat while the girl laughs nervously. The Emperor said that then the young man would receive the dragon claw's reward. Everything will be arranged, and meanwhile they can rest. Orica exhaled at that moment. After some time, Ryu trained with Lear and Karin. Ryu practiced with a blade. Lear asks you if he's okay while the young man wipes his sweat, adding that he has not recovered yet and may rest a little more, but since you said he was fine, he should practice. Ryu noticed the dark dragon still hadn't recovered. Yura is looking after him, which is good. Ryu needs to get much stronger to catch up with the heroes. Orica stepped up to Ryu, handed him a bottle and a towel, and told Joyous to take them. Then the girl asked whether the young man really trained that much. Unfortunately, that's all she can do to help. The young man thanks the girl. Watch closely as Ryu wipes his sweat. Ryu asks the girl what is wrong. She says nothing and then asks what the young man will do when he receives the award. Ryu says he plans to look for his friends later and asks Alaka what she would like to do. Suddenly, Oka gets nervous and asks the young man if she can go with him and his companions if possible. Ryu asks what the Emperor will say. Aka tells him not to worry because her father said it would be good for her to tell the world, and she adds that if they ask together, he will surely allow it, and she would go with them if possible. Amazed, Ryu remembered that the girl had said she really wanted to travel. Oka believed she was a princess and felt she could not simply leave the country, but she wanted to more than anything. Suddenly, Karin broke the silence. Karin is happy and says she agrees and has no problem traveling with her. Lear said they couldn't do that at all. Silence fell. Ryu said everything was correct and that they couldn't make such an important decision alone. Ashika said nothing. Ryu patted the girl's head and told her not to worry because they would go with her. Ryu smiles and says they will definitely get the Emperor's permission and asks her to believe in him. Delighted, Oku clenched her fists and smiled as she asked if it was really true. Just as they were about to go to the Emperor, a man interrupted to say the emperor was calling and that he would escort them to the throne room. At last the group reaches the throne room, where a huge table fills the space, and the emperor pulls a white cloth off it and says this is the man's reward. 5 claws lay on the table. Rue was surprised at how many there were. The emperor said Tiamat explained that each claw has a different effect, so they prepared several options. The earth dragon's claws are very strong, the water dragon's claws are very flexible and beautiful, and the air dragon's claws are light and sharp. The emperor said there were also special ones, and asked the young man to choose any claws he liked. Ryu studies the claws and sees many different types, so he is unsure which one to choose. Suddenly he notices the claw and says he likes it. He immediately sees it as special and very comfortable in his hand. The emperor smiled and said he had a diamond in his eye. He says this claw is Tiamat. Ryu is stunned and asks whether he really belongs to Tiamat. The emperor says they were lucky because the student chose the teacher's claw, and Tiamat feels embarrassed and tells the emperor to stop. The emperor snapped his fingers, said he had a better idea, and asked Ryu why he shouldn't take Tiamat with him, leaving Ryu and Tiamat surprised. Aghaka, Karin, and Lear were surprised. When the emperor asked if she enjoyed training with Ryu, Tiamat said she was obliged to care for Mrs. Oke and had to refuse. Ryu notices Yuduka, clearly nervous, clutching the hem of her dress with her hands. Ryu smiled and nodded at the girl as she clenched her fist. Osuka stamped her heel, turned to her grandmother and father, and said she would like to go on a trip with Ryu if her grandmother did not want to. After thinking about it for a long time, she intends to see every wonder of the world in person and will not give up even if others oppose her. Boka bows and asks her grandmother and father for permission to go on a trip. Suddenly, everyone began whispering that Ms. Aka was still a child and that it was too dangerous. The emperor says he understands the girl's feelings, but insists she is still too young and must wait a few more years, and Tiamat suddenly disagrees. Aka fought the dragon of darkness and did well. Tiamat thinks Aka has grown up enough. She will be with you, and he is strong enough that there will be no problems. The grandmother says they should let Yuka go, surprising the girl, and Tiamat turns to the young man and says she has one condition. She insists Ryu must protect Oku during the journey. If Oku is hurt, the young man will face punishment from the scientific authorities. That could lead to an international scandal. She asks the young man whether he is ready to take responsibility for Oka. At that moment, Grandma is very serious. Oka says Ryu doesn't have to agree because she can protect herself. Tiamat pointed out that in a previous interview, Oka showed the opposite. She turns to Review and says that if the young man can't protect the lady, he can't give consent, so he asks her to answer the question. Ryu falls silent, then says he will speak frankly but cannot promise it. He can't predict what will happen on the journey, so he can't promise Okinawa won't get hurt, and the girl is frightened. Ryu promised that if anything happened, he would definitely help her, not because she was a princess, but because they were friends. They ask Ms. Tiamat to allow Akeka to travel with her friends. Ryu then bows. Mrs. Tiamat frowned, then smiled. She asked whether Ryu was really a friend of the princess. Ryu panicked and said that was exactly what happened. Lady Tiamat turns to the emperor and asks what he'll say and whether he'll let Orica go. Smiling, the emperor said he could not refuse their benefactor's request and told Aganka she could go on a trip. Oki's fist trembles as the girl rejoices and says she will be able to tell the world. Ryu turns to Aka and says he is very happy. Aka thanks him. Mrs. Tiamat interrupts and says she has one condition. She goes with them. Ryu, surprised, asks Mrs. Tiamat. Oka, startled, turns to his grandmother. Tiamat says she never said she wouldn't let them go alone. Tiamat warned that causing trouble abroad could spark an international conflict and also cause problems for Mr. Ryu. Tiamat asked the young man to be understanding about this. Lear says she does not mind, and Karina adds it will be more fun this way. Suddenly they asked Alpaca what was wrong. Alpaca said she was simply glad to finally have her freedom. The emperor laughed and told her not to say that. Before they left, the man said he would like to speak. The emperor said he had a request for the young man. Ryu looked surprised and asked what the request was. The emperor asks you whether they may visit the elf village. The elf forest is full of spirits, and Reo recently received a message from the Spirit King asking him to help with a case, which surprised Reo and left him unsure if he really needed to help. The emperor agrees, noting news of the Dragon of Darkness's death is spreading fast, and asks to borrow his powers. People have begun kidnapping elves, and he asks that all the poachers be caught. They capture spirits and sell the captured elves as servants. Unable to appear in human settlements, he asks the young man for help. Ryu said he understood everything because he is human too. Ryu believed he had asked a man he hated for help. He doesn't mind helping, but but he doesn't know how the others will react. He suddenly heard the girls telling Ryu to do his EC's fit. Lear says she is sure they all think the same. Oka says this is the best part of traveling because it lets the young man do what he wants. Ryu agreed to go to the elf village. The emperor said he felt honored that Ryu had asked for his help and was very happy. Ryu realizes he must speak to the king of spirits himself. The emperor said the village elder would speak for him. The elven village lies in the south of the great forest. Ryu said he understood and they set off. Emperor Yuk wants her to have a great time traveling. Mom wished her good luck. Oka smiled, said goodbye to her parents, and added that they had gone. Everyone was very happy. Sometime later, in the southern part of the great forest, the Ryu's group pushed through a dense thicket. Ryu said it was hard to walk here because of the roots, and Tiamat said many large trees grow in this part of the forest. They are approaching the elven village, so the path ahead will be easier. Ryu said he understood everything, then turned to the others and said there was very little left. He sees Agonka out of breath and clearly upset, and she says she's fine while trying to catch her breath. Tiamat told the girl to hurry. If they keep going at the same pace, they will never get there. She asked the princess to treat it like a workout and do her best, urging her. Ryoko was upset. Ryu said it was tough. Ryu said, by the way, this was his first time in this part of the forest. Miss Tiamat said it was fine. His spirits formed a barrier around the village so it could not be found, and Lear said they couldn't get into the village. Guardian spirits watch the barrier. If people identify themselves, the spirits will let them through. Ryu smiled and said they were already close. The young man looked surprised and glanced to the side. They saw a young man's small spirit. Ryu was very happy, and Karin said it was the first time they had seen them. Ryu asked the spirit if he had really come to meet them. Suddenly, the spirit pointed the way and flew there. You didn't know whether he should go after him or what had happened, and they could not tell where the spirit was flying so fast. Tiamat said she didn't understand anything, and as they moved away from the village, the young man suddenly heard a voice. Suddenly someone attacked them, and Lear and Ryu felt a little scared. Then they looked and saw a huge number of spiders. Tiamat said these monsters are called forest spiders. You had no idea where so many of them had come from, and Karin turned to the young man and told him to look away as huge spiders attacked people. Ryu said he had to help them. They quickly got rid of a bunch of spiders. A spider attacked the young man and left him very shocked. Ryu asked whether he was really safe, and Lear said he had fainted. Tiamat said he did not seem to have any serious injuries. Suddenly the spirit flew up to the young man. Ryu said that's why he brought them here, and a sound came from the carriage as its occupants called to a man and asked if he could help them. Elves were trapped in a cage and asked the young man to free them. Lear and Ryu were surprised when they saw the elves in the wagon. After a while they released them. The elves thanked the young man and said they could not reward him now. Ryu said he didn't need anything, introduced himself as Ryu, and explained he had come at the Spirit King's request. Agaka said everything was fine. Ryu said the spirit brought them here. The elf is surprised, then notices a spirit who tells her to be quiet and smiles. Eventually, people wake up, don't understand what happened, and discover they were attacked by forest spiders. They bolted, shouting that they didn't care about the elves because they needed to get away. Their lives mattered to them. They later realized they had fled without thinking and suddenly saw something on the ground. A sword catches his eye, bearing an emblem that appears on everything. Tiamat said she had never seen anything like this before. They all seem to come from the same group, and that group is clearly large. Maybe even the nobles belong to this group. Ryu says no further information is needed. They must go to the village. There they should speak with the king of spirits. They also need to escort the elves home. After a while, they walk through a dense forest, and Ryu realizes the kidnapped elves are 4 women and 2 children. He is horrified that even children are being abducted and refuses to imagine what their captors might do to them. We must stop the poachers right away and keep the elves and spirits safe. The elf girl says they're almost there. All they need to do is go through the bushes, then they arrive at their home. Surprised, Ryu says this is an elf village. The little spirit flies away and Ryu says goodbye to him. An elf runs up to them and calls Helen. He takes her in his arms and says he's glad she's okay. She says she's in pain, and the elf says he was so worried when she was kidnapped. Were you aware that they are a family? Helen points to the young man and says he saved them. The man bows and thanks you for saving Helen. Ryu says no thanks are needed, and he only helped in a difficult moment. Helen calls her grandfather and tells him they came at the King of Spirits' request, and the man asks if it's true before naming the young man as Mr. Ryu. Clearing his throat, he introduces himself as the village elder, Alrai Solon, and his granddaughter, Helen. Ryu is surprised the man is an elder and notices he appears no older than 20. Curious whether elves age at all, he decides to take them to the King of Spirits and asks the others to follow. Soon they arrive at a house with a round table, where several people are already seated and only one chair is empty. The elder tells the Lord Mr. Ryu has come at his request and says they can start rescuing their kin, and Ryu offers to discuss strategy. The elder agrees. Many of their relatives have been kidnapped by traitors and will soon be sold into the ministry. He developed a plan to deal with them, and Ryu asked what it was. The elven elder said they would break into the houses of the nobles who had bought their brothers, free all the elves and spirits, and kill all the bad people. That's all. Ryu reacted with surprise and asked what it all meant, then realized the plan was too simple, and Lear and Tiamat were also surprised and amazed. Lear whispered to Ryu, wondering if the elder was joking. Ryu said he did not think so. Karin told the elder this was a great plan. Valka agreed with her and added they could go kill everyone. Rushing into battle, they were suddenly stopped when Ryu grabbed both of them by the shoulders and ordered the girls to stop. He added that it was too reckless. First, how do they find out which houses the elves will be in, and why don't they immediately raid the dealers of prohibited goods? The elf said the scouts they sent to the kingdom still haven't returned. Ryu said if they attacked the nobles would seek revenge against the village. They need to think it over again, but the elf slammed his fist on the table and said they didn't have much time. Even now their relatives suffer at the hands of these ruthless people. They bear the pain hoping to save them and cannot keep them waiting. The elves began to support the one who had just given a speech. It was also very difficult for them, and that explained why they were in such a hurry. They want to save the elves and spirits as soon as possible, but Ryu purses her lips and says she needs to think everything through first. Attacking indiscriminately could kill the elves and waste a lot of time, doing more harm than good, so the elder asked what they should do next. Pressing a hand to his chest, Ryu tells the elves to leave it to him. He will visit the dealers of prohibited goods posing as a buyer. The elves are all surprised. Ryu says that once he sells, he'll be able to get the necessary information and might even buy some outright, and the elder asked whether it was too dangerous. Okas said that was all. Besides, he has no idea how much money the young man will need for this. Ryu says they only need to be earned. He'll get money from selling hunting materials from the Great Forest and already has a small reserve from sales in the Dwarf Kingdom, about 60 gold coins left. He turns to the elder and asks if there are dangerous monsters nearby. Doing so could earn him money. The elder says there are, of course, many forest spiders here. They recently appeared in the forest and have begun reproducing rapidly. People have already suffered enough because of them. Tiamat reminded the young man not to forget the monsters they had already defeated, and Ryu agreed, saying there would be no problems. With his hand raised, he announces they are starting a mission to save the elves and promises to do their best. At that moment deep in the forest, one spirit flew to another, and the second, seeing him, called out. Turning to the young man, the spirit asked where he had been because he had been looking for him for a long time, apologized that he only wanted to know a little about him, and warned that if the young man ran off like that he could get into trouble. Then he asked the spirit how it felt. The spirit puts on the mantle and says the King of Spirits recognized him as a very interesting guy. He is confident Ryu will be able to help their village. He says that even as a mentor, Ryu is very brave and kind-hearted. Long ago the Spirit King met a man, and together they decided to create a world between humans and spirits. The man agreed and suggested they sign a contract to use the spirit's power, since it could help people in many ways. The spirit asks what advantage they have. The man said he would explain now. He says people have now forgotten the spirit's blessings and treat them as mere workers, but they can change that. Reading the letter, the King of Spirits realizes he seems to be the only one who still believes it. Later, Ryu killed several spiders and said he thought it was enough. The elf wondered if anyone would buy them. Ryu said they could be used in many ways, like making clothes from the threads, and then said they could go to the principality now, when an elder came up and called Ryu. The elder asked the young man to help their brothers because the elder's daughter had been abducted. Ryu was surprised and asked whether that was true. The elder said many children, parents, and even orphans had been abducted. Each of them is still dear to him. All the elves bow and ask you and his group to bring them home. The protagonist agrees. The elder reaches into his pocket and asks the young man to accept something. The elder gives him a package. Ryu asks what kind of letter it is. The elder says the letter is from the King of Spirits and that the young man should give it to the ruler of the principality. Ryu asks which ruler of the principality the young man means. Ryu asks what the letter contains. The elder tells him to hand it over. Ryu agrees, saying he may not be able to meet the man but will try. Ryu replies yes. The elder thanks Ryu's group. Ryu and his team turn to leave. as the elves offer them the Spirit King's blessing. Later the girls asked Ryu what kind of principality Uruk was, and he told Karin he did not know the details, but that things there were less strict than in other countries, and no card is needed to enter. Miss Tiamat said the spirits had also blessed this principality, and Oka, surprised, asked whether elves and spirits were really being kidnapped to be sold, and Tiamat said it was probably someone's scheme. First, gather information. When they sell the spiders to the guild, they should talk to the people there. They arrive in the city and Ryu asks whether this is really the principality of Ifruch, saying he does not see anything special. They step into the guild and find it strangely lifeless. The young man pulls out the spiders and says he wants to sell them. They hand him money and ask him to count it. Rue thanked him but felt a strange sense of déjà vu. He then says they have received the money. Suddenly, someone calls Rue. It was Mac. The young man said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Mac said he'd heard someone was selling rare materials, so he came to take a look. He'd expected a young man. Ryu was surprised. Aurka asked Ryu if he really knew the mechanic. Ryu confirmed that they had met in the land of the dwarves. Mac said he could hardly believe he'd run into Ryu here. He hadn't expected the young man to come at such a busy time. Ryu is surprised and asks the young man what kind of stressful time Max is talking about. Max said the young man might not know the ruler had recently fallen ill, and Ryu was very surprised. Matt continued, saying that in this country, anyone who signs a contract with the King of Spirits becomes the ruler. At the moment, no one has been able to sign the contract, and people are very worried. Rue said everything was clear and thought about what it meant that the Spirit King and the current ruler were familiar, and that the letter might refer to the future recipient. Mac asked what he was doing here anyway. The young man was surprised, but decided he could not tell Mac he had come to save the elves. Ryu replied that a village had asked him to look for missing people, and Mac, surprised, said Ryu was very kind. Ryu asks the young man if he has any information, and if he has heard anything about servants in this country. Mac says it's not much, and mentions a shadowy guild here called the Black Wolves that deals in illegal goods. The man said he remembered someone connected to the guild, and Ryu, surprised, asked if that was true. Max warned that once Ryu's group appeared, it would be hard to reach him, and Ryu looked surprised and asked what that meant. Max said dealers and those with prohibited goods are mainly identified by their clothes, so they can easily be mistaken for the poor. Ryu said he understood. NAC said that once they had expensive clothes, they could go straight to him. There was nothing else he could do, and you thanked them again. After a while, the man waved and said goodbye. The girls grew worried and asked whether everything would be all right. Karin called it inconvenient. Orica told the girl it suits her very well. Tiamat told everyone to behave like aristocrats and watch their behavior and words. The heroes wore dashing, expensive clothes. Rue told the girls everything was fine and suggested they repeat it all, and in the family Rue is the father, Tiamat is his wife, and Karin and Olteka are their daughters. He wants to say who Lear will be, but the girl screamed loudly and asked why she had to be an animal. Rue said the girl could not hide her tail behind her ears, so she could not pass as human. She became upset, and they decided to go to dealers of illegal goods, and everyone agreed. Soon the whole group was met by the butler, who asked if it was really their first time. Ryu agreed and said his close friend Mac had recommended them to him, and the man said he understood everything. The man asked Ryu which servant they were interested in, and Ryu was surprised because he hadn't even thought about planning a purchase. Suddenly Mrs. Tiamat interrupted them, saying he should do his housework properly and look presentable, and she asked what kind of servants they had. The man said they should be allowed to display all their goods, so he asked them to follow him. Ryu turns to Tiamat, and she waves her head. They walk down a long flight of stairs. Ryu asked the man what kind of servants they kept. The man said they had many servants. A man couldn't pay his debts. A former adventurer was there. No, the man was generally sure they would be satisfied. Valka whispered that it was disgusting. Ryu asked her to be quiet. The band also said they still have half-humans. Ryu asked whether they were even available. The man agreed, said it was exactly like that, and asked you if you were really interested. He said he could show them if they wanted. The man asked Ryu which species Ryu was interested in, maybe dogs or cats, and then Ryu asked if they had elves, which surprised the man. He stopped and whispered to Tiamat again, asking if he had really said something wrong. Tiamat said he might have begun to suspect. The man apologized and said he was very sorry. Unfortunately, he said they do not have any elves, and Rue was surprised. After a while, they reached the room. The man says elves are valuable and are only sold at auction. Rue said he understood everything, so they couldn't be found at other merchants either, and the man agreed that selling them at auctions was much more profitable. The protagonist thought this was very bad. Money and merchants could fix most problems, but auctions were different. The highest bidder wins at auctions, and the elves would be worth a fortune. He realizes they must find where they're being held more quickly. Ryu asks the man where the auction will take place. The man apologized, but said he could not disclose that information. Ryu sets a bag of gold coins on the table and asks the man to tell him a bit about elves in exchange for a modest gift. The man looks very surprised. One man hands over a list of people put up for auction and asks the other man not to tell anyone. There are an unusually large number of women and children among them. Recently, the Dark Guild has been trying its hardest. He heard they had recently captured a group of elves. Ryu realizes there are so many of them. If they want to free everyone, they need to act carefully. Ryu suddenly spots where Ray Solon. Pointing at her, the man says the dear client has a good eye. You realize she will be sold at auction in 3 days, and the headman asks you to save his daughter. He looks at the girl and realizes they share the same last name, so she must be the elder's daughter. TM out whispers to the young man that there is little time left before the auction and they should hurry. Ryu agreed. Ryu says that means there will be a chance to get a real treasure soon, then asks why elves are so valuable, and the man replies he doesn't know, but when Ryu gives him another bag of coins, he agrees to tell Ryu everything. In the Dark Guild they say a spirit follows every elf, and the elf itself is just a welcome extra, so Ryu asks about that extra and wonders what it means. The man asks whether you know that the ruler is ill right now. As a result, everyone is now trying to sign a contract with the spirit, and elves are needed for that. The spirits usually stay close to the elves. After hearing everything, the main character said he understood. Ryu remembers the elf saying that even now their brothers and sisters are suffering terribly, and that they asked the young man to help. Watching the man, he thinks the elves' hearts are breaking, that they have started a spirit hunt and now treat elves like things. Ryu was very angry. Karin even noticed and said Dad was very angry, and Orica said she felt bloodlust. The man asked Ryu if there was anything else he could do to help. Ryu replied no and said that would be enough. He asked whether he could find out who was behind it. The man apologized and said he did not have that information. Ryu thanked the man for the information. He says they think it is time to go. Next time they will definitely buy a servant from him. The man thanked them and said he would look forward to their next visit. After a while, Lear said she couldn't believe elves were being kidnapped just for money. Karin said it was terrible to see live. Lear turned to Ryu and asked if the young man was okay, and he said everything was fine. The young man said they would certainly save all the elves and cannot understand how anyone would treat other races like objects. Lear and Karin agreed with him. Ryu says more information is needed. We must locate where the prisoners are being held and identify who is behind this. Ms. Tiamat suggested the children change their clothes because they are too conspicuous now. Ryu agreed with the girl, and they decided to hide the clothes here. The main character says he needs to ask more questions while he opens a pot on the ground and is stunned by what he finds inside. Inside, a child stood giggling nervously as they greeted Ryu, and everyone was very surprised. Ryu picked up and closed the pot's lid after the child greeted him. The child screamed, asking the young man what he was doing, and he apologized, saying he did not mean to invade the child's home. The girl said this was not her house and that she was not a child. Her name is Alice. She will be 19 this year and is an informant from the land of the world. Alice also warned the young man not to underestimate her. Ryu said he looked like a child. Ryu then spoke of the land of light and said it was his home. Alice was surprised and asked whether he really came from there too. Ms. Tiamat asked whether the land of light is really a country ruled by the church. Oka asked about the church. Ryu said this is where they enter their profession, a huge organization of priests. Alice said everything was right, so she came here to serve their hero. Ryu looked surprised and asked if they really knew Chikaya. Alice confirmed that she is a member of the heroes group and works in intelligence and information gathering, though her squad is a little different from the rest of the heroes. Because they're from the same city, she asks the young man to help her with a case. Ryu asks what that means. The girl says the trade in prohibited goods is flourishing in this country and must be stopped. Ryu realizes Alice shares their goal. Alice said she already knows exactly how they came to the city to rescue the servants. They posed as wealthy people and infiltrated a dealer selling banned goods. She can give them a lot of useful information and asks what they think and whether they will help free the servants. Ryu thinks it over and asks the girl to let him find out why they are. Given that Alice works in the intelligence group, they should be the ones to release the servants. She said she could get information easily but couldn't fight. She tried to enter the auction and was thrown out, so Ryu told her to ask Poff for help, and Alice agreed that excessive spirit hunting was a big problem. Elemental magic comes from spirits because long ago people made a contract with the king of spirits and he granted them the power. Such an outburst can end the fight, but afterward they may lose their magic, have to face the monsters alone, and Ryu thinks the hero might lose his powers too. Alice rushed to Ryu and begged him, promising she would repay him and insisting she had to finish the mission, saying he could not face the hero if he failed. Ryu agreed and said they would help. Lear said the hero hates monsters and that it's okay for them to help. Ryu decides it's better for them not to approach the hero yet, but getting information won't hurt, so he invites Lear to talk. Alice appears to be from a different squad than the hero. Alice's information could help them. They might avoid the hero's attention. Tiamat said it would be better this way, and he says that settles everything. Rue says they will help, but in return the girl will share the information they want. Alice asked whether that was true, thanked the young man, and said she would contact the squad. The girl fell silent. Karin asked what she was doing. Ryu said it was a magical artifact. It works much like their connection. Alice says she has permission, asks them to talk in the room, and the girl tells everyone to follow her. She trips and falls. Ryu doubts she's really from the scouting squad. After a while they returned, and Alice told the captain she was back, and the man said they had been waiting for them. Another group met Ryu's group. The man thanked the guys for helping Alice.